4.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, oh Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna.
From the ethereal realm of devotion to the practicality of daily spiritual practice, across the vast landscape of Vedic wisdom and teachings, this is Vaishnava Voices. Hosted by the dynamic husband and wife duo, Sitapati Das and Dana Devi, they bring to you an intimate exploration of the vibrant world of Vaishnavism. Interweaving ancient scriptures with modern contexts, personal stories with universal lessons, they illuminate the path of love, devotion, and conscious living.
Hare Krishna, and welcome everyone to another episode of Vaishnava Voices. I'm your co-host, Sitapati Das, and beside me, as always, is the wonderful Dana Devi. Today, as with every episode, we're diving deep into the heart of Vaishnava teachings, exploring the wisdom, culture, and practices that guide us towards a life filled with devotion and service.
That's right, Sitapati. We are thrilled to have you on this journey with us. Whether you are a seasoned devotee, a spiritual seeker, or simply curious about Vaishnavism, here in Vaishnava Voices, we are all about fostering connection, understanding, and growth. And remember, we are not just exploring, we are also experiencing. So let's begin.
So sit back, prepare your hearts and minds, and tune into the sounds of the soul on Vaishnava Voices.
Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam, total world victory of Hare Krishna. Welcome to today's episode of Vaishnava Voices podcast. I'm your host. My name is Sitapati Das, and it's just me today. Dana Devi is recovering from, we're old school, so we don't get COVID, we get the flu. She's recovering from the flu at the moment, resting. So it's just going to be me and our guest for today. Very hot topic, discussing the book that's recently come out, Tough Questions, Difficult Answers. It's Krishna-kirti Das from the ISKCON India Scholars Board. Let me see if I can bring him in here. Hare Krishna Prabhu, welcome.
Hare
Dandavats.
Krishna, my obeisances to you, Sitapati Prabhu.
Dandavats Prabhu. So good to speak to you finally in person. We've been connected over the internet for, I don't know, going on to a couple of decades now.
Yeah, it's been about 20 years.
Yeah. Last time we were on the opposite side of a conversation. This time our viewpoints may have drifted closer together, I think, having read the ISKCON India Scholars Board papers that you came up with. I'd like to dive straight into it because I'm kind of like, when I watch these podcasts, I'm like, come on, I got ADHD these days, like engage my intelligence with something. This is going to be spicy. This is going to be hot. A real brief introduction. I'll make one, then I'll get you to introduce yourself, what you want people to know about you. You're part of the ISKCON Indian Scholars Board. That's kind of the context that you're speaking in today.
Yes.
You live in India.
Mm-hmm.
Probably great.
2017. I've been here since 2017.
2017. I remember you were working in like a nuclear reactor or something in Texas, or something like that.
Well, I have an extensive IT background. Actually, I was in India for a good 6 years at another time. I came here I came here to India in 92 and got married in 94 here in Delhi. And then my wife and I went back to America in 98. And the idea was that we thought that we were going to make some quick money, make $100K, come back to India, stick it in a bank, live off the interest, and, do service. And we thought that was going to be a quick thing, but, that it was not a quick thing. So we were there in America for another 20 years. And, and so, I kind of stumbled into the IT industry. So like you, I was programmer, geek, kind of like that. That's a whole other story that, how I fell into that. The interesting story, somewhat intertwined with, kind of my service before that in the BBT in India, and also, some of the more controversies that have been swirling around ISKCON and those things. So that's a whole other thing. And so my wife and I, we got our, we were able to kind of like get our little fortune together, so to speak, that enabled us to retire early. We both wanted to retire around the age of 50, and Krishna and the Vaishnav sadhus and renunciates very kindly, blessed us with that. Nothing can happen without the blessings of the Vaishnavas and the gurus and your guru and everything like that. So then we were able to retire, leave our work, come back to India, and engage in a full-time service. So here we are.
Let's go straight to the controversy then. I asked Kaunteya, because Kaunteya Prabhu, he was previously on the show. We're talking about female Diksha gurus. We had Sridhar Srinivasa Prabhu came on to talk about his book, Female Diksha Gurus, Do We Need Them? Mm-hmm. You were in the comments section, and I was like, hey, we should get you and Kaunteya on the show together to discuss this. But then Kaunteya said, I refuse to debate Krishna-kirti in public because he's a guru aparadi, because he's renounced his guru in good standing, which is, it's interesting that you said without the blessings of like the guru and the sadhus, we can't do anything. So, I mean, that's a controversial point right there, right?
It's a controversial point, but that's also in the Vedic literature. Bali Maharaj, he gave up his guru, not because he fell down or anything, but because he was getting misdirection. So, these are the law books. This happens sometimes. Gurus sometimes give misdirection sometimes, and the disciples can't always go along with it. That was a particular period, and this, since it does come up in, and it was specifically over the issue of homosexuality and whether we should have marriage, allow homosexuals to get marriage, and on that point, there's just too much of a difference between my former spiritual master and Śrīla Prabhupāda on this. So, I have a choice, and I chose the path that at least, that has goes with Śrīla Prabhupāda. So another thing that this will, and perhaps for another topic, to discuss online or offline, is that there's not a institutional solution for every major problem, which is why, this controversy is a problem. I would like to say that, just to give an example, this whole thing is an example. Why is it, that even though, like, the idea of homosexuality and marriage and so forth like that, even though Śrīla Prabhupāda's, spoken against it, even though some people have come up in favor of it, even though it's still an issue, because it's in the book. And other things, the female Diksha Guru issue, this is still going on. The Ritvik issue is still going on, in many ways like that. And the institutional approaches to this have not been satisfactory. Well, they've not settled the issue. So, so it's really important to understand that not everything can be taken care of by the institution. And so therefore, it's very important that, different persons, different concerned persons, different qualified persons actually address these issues in a public way. So anyway, what can I say?
When you say that there's not an institutional solution, do you mean categorically, or are you just saying, like, as in there does not exist, there cannot be, like, there is no such thing as an institutional, or are you just saying that ISKCON doesn't have a solution for it at the moment? Which of those kind of two senses do you mean it in?
Well, I'm saying that what I'm saying is that there are certain things that institutions aren't good at dealing with, especially political solutions. And one of the reasons is that, when you're a manager, and especially you're dealing with, oftentimes you're dealing with things that are happening on at the moment, on the horizon of your consciousness. But beyond that, there are certain issues that, it's like rabies, for example. If you have to wait until you get symptoms, until you see symptoms to deal with the problem, it's over for you. It's finished. So in the same way too, I guess one of the kind of like management blind spots is a philosophical issue. That if you have to wait for a wrong philosophy to get to the point where it's become a political problem, where it's influenced large numbers of people, you probably can't deal with it any more effectively. And I think that in a number of cases, we've reached that point. And it's just, the thing just becomes unmanageable, or you just, that's how schisms happen. So I think that for people who are concerned about the integrity and the effectiveness of ISKCON in the future, we have to be attentive to, these issues and not neglect them. And oftentimes those people who are sitting on a management position simply don't have the time to actually focus on these things. So therefore, it's not just the institution that can take care of it. And we shouldn't have too high of an expectation on the institution to do things. But the institution can also recognize that, okay, we have our limitations, but these people can do it, and they can elevate those people that are experts in some area, that these people are actually competent to take care of this problem. So that's what institutions can do.
So far, opinion online is polarized about this episode and the issues around it, and really the way it's being framed, I can see in the comments, is people are like, is the idea that Prabhupada is all-knowing and can never make a mistake, it just seems ridiculous, pie in the sky to say such a thing. That seems to be the counterpoint to this. It's like, either Prabhupada's perfect and can make no mistakes and everything he says is perfect, or he makes mistakes. He can make mistakes. And then there's another aspect of that, which is kind of like the cultural conditioning part, but nobody's brought that cultural conditioning up in the comments that I've seen. They've been positing can make mistakes, can't make mistakes, can be mistaken. Do you think that's an accurate way to frame this issue?
I think the good I think a good metaphor, a way of thinking of this, is that this is like the moon landings. Okay, so Śrīla Prabhupāda, he rejected the notion that men went to the moon, that they landed on the moon on the basis of Shastra. So he said clearly that the descriptions of the moon they've given, it's dusty, there's no life there, it's barren. He says this cannot be the moon because the Bhagavatam and the Shastras describe the moon as having vegetation, people, buildings. So they cannot have gone to the moon. So this, this question of did Śrīla Prabhupada commit mistakes? Now, specifically, I want to limit this to the idea that Śrīla Prabhupada influenced by his material body and circumstances. That's really what Kaunteya Prabhu's book tries to answer. And the Shastras give a clear answer that they are not. And
just 1 second, Brew, we're in luck because Dhanadevi has made it in for the episode. Okay. So you're going to get both of us. Let me just switch this here, and I'm just going to hook her up.
Hare Krishna.
He's saying Hare Krishna. I'm just going to hook her up with a monitor so she can hear. Give me 1 second. Krishna Hare Hare. Actually, I should give you the other one. Yeah. Sorry about this. Technical hitch. Okay, so the Bluetooth ones ran out of power, so we've got these ones instead.
So
you can use this one.
Yeah. Good to go yet?
Okay, this topic was too enticing. It's like nothing that could keep her away from this.
Yeah.
So
I would like to suggest, just to address this.
Yes.
I would like to suggest reading an excerpt from Kaunteya Prabhu's book. Rather kind of like just a substantial excerpt that I think will will be useful for the audience as a point of reference, and also bring in focus the question, the topic of the question that you pose about whether Śrīla Prabhupada committed mistakes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
Okay. So, 1 second.
And folks, if you want to order a copy of this book so that you can read it yourself, you can write to Kaunteya Das and on Facebook or on email, and you can get a copy of it, read the whole thing yourself, do your own research.
Okay, this is page 36. This is page 36, beginning on page 36. This is the section, perfect doesn't mean infallible. So he starts the section just pointing out that Śrīla Prabhupada, he reported that he felt the discomforts of his old age, that, he talked about his illnesses and so forth. And then just to start with, Kaunteya says, he was indeed transcendental in the sense that his bodily discomfort didn't affect his Krishna consciousness and his determination to serve, but not in the sense that he didn't feel any pain. These nonetheless are secondary considerations. What's more relevant to our discussion is if and to what extent his psychic body was affected by the culture surrounding him and by the information, especially if inaccurate, that he received. So just one comment here as a point of reference. So first point is that being made is that, or suggested is that Śrīla Prabhupada, he was affected by his ideas or his notion of what's right and wrong, or correct or incorrect, were influenced by his body and social circumstances. So continuing on, of course, the main sources of his knowledge were sacred texts such as the Gita and the Bhagavatam, reservoirs of superhuman, infallible revelations about reality, valid descriptions of both material and spiritual dimensions. Śrīla Prabhupada was also the receiver and representative of realizations of the many liberated souls in the Parampara, the chain of spiritual teachers, besides having his own mystical insights. No issue there. What remains to be defined: was he infallible in the literal sense of never making a mistake or never incorporating imperfect data into his outlook? It seems that we need a, quote, theology of embodiment, unquote, a coherent philosophical explanation of how liberated, empowered personalities such as Śrīla Prabhupada are affected by their inhabiting Prakritic, material, physical, and psychic tabernacles. Such theology, I believe, would have to preserve the respect for such great souls as perfected beings, revering them as divine emissaries, while detailing how their dwelling in material bodies and minds may impose certain circumstantial limitations. A material body is synonymous with limitation, but this doesn't necessarily have to significantly curtail or impact the spiritual stature or effectiveness of great souls. Now, one may legitimately argue that the body of a pure devotee should not be considered material. Quote, the body of Bhishma Dev lost its material effects due to being surcharged with spiritual realization. And thus the body was spiritualized as when iron becomes red hot when in contact with fire. The body of a fully self-realized soul is not therefore accepted as material, unquote. Śrīla Prabhupada often spoke of how to render the body spiritualized. One must take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and by his instructions increase one's knowledge in devotional service, become detached from the material world, and thus become liberated. An advanced devotee, therefore, does not live within the material body, but within his spiritual body, just as a dry coconut lives detached from the coconut husk, even though within the husk. The pure devotee's body is therefore called Chinmaya Sharira, spiritualized body. In other words, a devotee's body is not connected with material activities, and as such, a devotee is always liberated. Brahma Bhuya Yakalpate. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 4.26, Srila Rupa Goswami also confirms this. Iha yasya harer dasye karmana manasa gira nikolas vastasu jivan muktaha sa uchyate. Whatever his condition may be, one who is engaged fully within his body, mind, and speech in the service of the Lord is liberated even within this body. Unquote. At the same time, although spiritual or spiritualized, the body of the pure devotee doesn't become omnipresent, omniscient, or omnipotent. It still partakes of the limitations of time and space, of partial perception, of being Atma and not Paramatma. The body still manifests the properties of matter, but it's considered purified because it's fully engaged in spiritual service. Quote, even if you are in this material body, if you advance yourself in spiritual consciousness or Krishna consciousness, you will be spiritualized. Your body will be spiritualized. You'll be no more affected by this material contamination, unquote. The question remains, can a purified, liberated soul commit mistakes? One may believe that Śrīla Prabhupada did not and could not make any mistake. For instance, someone wrote, quote, I don't think that Śrīla Prabhupada was omniscient, but as a perfect instrument for Lord Krishna, he didn't make mistakes. He was perfectly guided by the Supreme, perfect at every moment, unquote. To me, this appears as a robotic conception of Śrīla Prabhupada, one that depersonalizes him, almost turning him into a mechanized entity micromanaged by Paramatma. Personally, I am more inclined to take Śrīla Prabhupada's word at face value when he says, for instance, Krishna cannot be mistaken. I am imperfect, I can be mistaken, but Krishna cannot be mistaken, unquote. Or when he says, quote, every one of us, we commit mistakes. To error is human. That is a fact. Everyone will admit. Yes, nobody can say that, quote, I have never committed any mistake. Nobody can say that is not possible, unquote. The theme was recurring. We commit mistakes. Every one of us who are sitting in this meeting, nobody can say that I have never committed any mistake. That is not possible. We commit mistakes, everyone. You inquire whether I am perfect or my disciples who are preaching this Krishna consciousness movement, they are perfect. We may be imperfect. We are imperfect. We accept we are imperfect, but we are distributing this perfect knowledge. We may be imperfect, but Krishna is perfect, unquote. Now, someone may interpret in a different way, saying, no, Śrīla Prabhupada was simply mimicking the conditioned souls. And out of great humility, he was saying that he also made mistakes. But actually, he was liberated and therefore beyond the 4 defects that afflict everyone in this world, unquote. Look, I don't have the final word, and you, the reader, can subscribe to whatever idea you want, whatever you wish to believe. Krishna can strengthen that conviction into something unmovable. He says in Gita, yo yam yam tanum bhaktaha shraddaya chittamichati tasya tasyat chalam shraddham tam eva vididhamyaham. Regardless of the type of faith one desires to develop, Krishna in the heart can give to that person a trust that is unwavering, achalam. And so I'm not going to try too hard to change opinions. Let's try for something we probably can all agree. Śrīla Prabhupada wasn't God, the omnipotent and omnipresent supreme being. He was a servant of God. And as such, he wasn't omniscient. So I'm going to stop there. So this is a good chunk, about 3-4 good 4 pages here. But from the starting point, I want to address what is his thesis here and the shortcoming of that thesis. So his thesis is basically that Śrīla Prabhupada could commit mistakes. And those mistakes specifically had a bearing on his views of the world.
Okay. Can I ask a couple of questions at this point?
But one thing I want to point out is that the very end of that excerpt that I wrote, that I quoted, he mentions the 4 defects as a purva paksha. So he says, so he mentions the 4 defects, and then he doesn't address it. So this whole book, 600 pages, 666 pages, he does not deal at all with the 4 defects of the conditioned souls, or trying to reconcile his thesis with that notion. So that is the main drawback of his thesis, is that he does not consider that a liberated person is free from the 4 defects of conditioned souls, and the authority for that is the Shastra itself. So,
Okay. My first question, Prabhu, is, do you think that this question is allowed? Like to consider the question, can Śrīla Prabhupada commit errors or make mistakes? Like, is this is it offensive to even think that or to ask that question, or is this like an allowable topic of conversation or inquiry?
well, it's a legitimate subject of inquiry, but that has to be answered authoritatively. That's the thing. So, yeah.
Well, in the section you read here, I was like, this seems, I mean, I didn't agree with all of it, but there's a couple of things about it. First one was he's quoting from Śrīla Prabhupāda's statements and from Shastra. He's not outside the tradition, He's like, it's kind of, he's not like a Buddhist, right? He's not like what are they called? Nastika. Is that what they're called? The people who go,
Gnostic,
they reject the Veda. Yeah, he's not Gnostic, So, okay, this is like I might disagree with it, but it seems to be a Vedic school, right? And then the other thing is he was really like, different people can see it in different ways, and Krishna will make their faith strong. And Śrīla Prabhupada himself says, I can make mistakes, and I just take his words as they are without an interpretive meta theory. So isn't that pretty much like case closed right there? I mean, the specifics of the mistakes that he makes is now, a question, but categorically, he's stated himself that I can make mistakes.
Yeah, so that has to, those statements have to be reconciled with Shastric statements by the Acharyas that say that a liberated devotee cannot commit any mistake. So the standard is that, just like when Prabhupada was having this debate with Dr. Stahl, so Śrīla Prabhupada would quote everything, this is in the science of self-realization. Śrīla Prabhupada would quote something, Dr. Stahl would quote something in opposition to it, and would go back and forth. And finally, Śrīla Prabhupada said that you have to understand these things in a unified way. And he says that the understandings of the unauthorized parampara give a rupturous appearance to the Shastras. In other words, there's an inconsistency there. So that is that's the shortcoming in Kaunteya Prabhu's book, is that it doesn't, it fails to reconcile with these statements that a pure devotee cannot commit any mistake. Letter to Janardana, the 26th April 1968, very nice letter where Prabhupada's very talking. He says that a liberated guru and acharya cannot commit any mistake. So now is that wrong? So if we say that's wrong, then we falsified Śrīla Prabhupada, and then Śrīla Prabhupada, we can't take anything. We have to take everything that Śrīla Prabhupada says with a grain of salt. He's not an authority.
Okay. Here's a Hridayananda Das Goswami one for you then. You're going to love this. But then, Prabhu, if you take that approach, are you not vulnerable to the same defeater yourself, in that, as Kaunteya Prabhu is presented here, Śrīla Prabhupada himself says, I may commit errors.
I can make mistakes.
I can make mistakes, And now you're saying he wrote a letter where he says the liberated acharya can't, make a mistake. And if we say that he made a mistake, we're contradicting him. But it would seem in that case, he has contradicted himself.
No, it's like this. It's, in this case, it's like, whoever's arguing this point has channeled their inner literalist. Okay. That, they criticize, people who are, those of us who are defending Śrīla Prabhupada on this point, that he's not making mistakes, that we're just being literalists. But here you're being literalist. I'm going to take this word of Śrīla Prabhupada's and I'm going to interpret it literally to the exclusion of any other evidence. Now, the Shastric evidence, this is Brahma Pramada Vipralipsa Karnanapatava Arshavagyavaki Nahi Dosha E Sabha. So this is in the second chapter of the Adi Leela, and Krishnadas Kaviraj is discussing the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavatam shloka, Ete Chamsa Kalapam Samvishwas, to Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. So he's saying that there are no faults in the words of the acharyas like Vyasadeva and so forth like that. So that's why they're authoritative. In the purport to the second chapter, shloka 12 of Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita commentary, he says that that one who is influenced by the four defects of the conditioned souls cannot be an authority. He says that to establish Krishna's authority. So he's beyond the four defects. And so what are the four defects? Now this is where technicalities matter. This is where definitions matter. So first defect, Brahma, what does that mean? Brahma means that one thinks an object is something other than it actually is. Okay? That's Brahma.
Confused perception.
Yeah. So essentially, and Kaunteya Prabhu is more or less explicitly said it in his book, in certain examples, that Śrīla Prabhupada is seeing something that is not what it actually is. And if you say that this is what Śrīla Prabhupada is doing, then the implication, it necessarily follows that Śrīla Prabhupada has to be a conditioned soul. So we're going to have to kind of like back away from those literalist interpretations. I'm going to take Prabhupada seriously. I'm going to interpret him literally. Well, you can't interpret him literally on this point. It's like, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saying before, I'm a fool. My spiritual master found me a fool, or I consider myself a fool. So now we're going to say, okay, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is a fool. He said it. He's a fool. I believe it. Are we going to do that? No. So no, we have to, we're going to go with the Shastra on this, and then we're going to have to reconcile these various statements so that we have a harmonious understanding. That's the thing. Kaunteya Prabhu has presented an understanding that is not harmonious, and hence, we've raised some objection to this.
Maybe Śrīla Prabhupada is a conditioned soul. What do you think about that? Because that's basically what his book is saying, right?
He vacillates between these positions. He's not actually clear on this. Okay, we can say Prabhupada's a pure devotee. Okay, but then what does that mean? That a pure devotee, if you're not affected by these four defects, if you're a liberated soul, you're not affected by these four defects of a conditioned soul. So it's a contradictory position that's actually presented in the book. It's a rupturous appearance. It's a rupturous understanding.
I see.
I can hear here also by just the reading, like the example you're giving about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I'm a fool. And Śrīla Prabhupada here, I see this as a humbleness to put Sri Krishna right up incomparably. He says, I can make mistakes. Doesn't mean he can. He doesn't mean he is like you said, having or disposing those four defects in himself.
So if I can extend or explain the argument that I heard you make in relation to that, it's that because Śrīla Prabhupada's hermeneutic, of course, is as it is, but we do have to deal with the contradiction here because as I pointed out earlier, the two statements are there. The 1968 letter to Janardana that you cited, where he says the liberated Acharya can't make any mistake. And then the copious number of examples that Kaunteya Das has given in his book of him saying I can make a mistake. How do you reconcile those two things? They're contradictory. And so it becomes necessary to do something with that. And so what you're saying is that these are to be understood as statements of humility or as like exemplary behavior of the Acharya acting as, coming to the Madhyama platform, if you will, to say, hey, this is our human condition, but it's for the purpose of preaching rather than tattva, if you will. Is that the...
I think that's fair. Srila Prabhupada, he's teaching by his example. He's being very humble and so forth like that. And when it comes down to it, is Srila Prabhupada a liberated guru, an acharya, a liberated soul, or not? If he's a liberated soul, then he cannot be influenced by these 4 defects. And if he is not liberated, then he's influenced by these 4 defects. Then he's a conditioned soul. And that matters because if he is a conditioned soul, then any of his statements cannot be authoritative.
Then his books can be edited by other conditioned souls, and they're just the same thing.
Or overridden.
Yeah. Well, that really comes to the crux of the matter. I mean, Kaunteya Prabhu, maybe he doesn't want to come out straight out and say it because it's not politically tenable to say it, although the conclusion itself is palpable throughout ISKCON these days, that Prabhupada's he's a conditioned soul, Or the other way of presenting it is he's a previous acharya. So just like, different previous acharyas are overridden or reinterpreted according to time, place, and circumstance, Śrīla Prabhupada now is also. It's kind of like, if you will, the relativization of Śrīla Prabhupada, or minimization. Of course, at the time when he was here, people would Radha Raman's up in the chat with the quotes. Let's bring it in. We'll get this from him. He says, this is from Srimad Bhagavatam 4.18.5 purport. Presently, people are so fallen that they cannot distinguish between a liberated soul and a conditioned soul. A conditioned soul is hampered by 4 defects. He is sure to commit mistakes. He's sure to become illusioned. So the first one is Brahman that you mentioned. He's sure to become illusioned. He has a tendency to cheat others, and his senses are imperfect. Consequently, we have to take direction from liberated persons. Prabhu, would you like to finish that Sankhya that you were creating there of the 4 defects of the conditioned soul? You created the first one, I believe, Brahman, the tendency to commit mistakes.
Well, in this regard, I would like to refer to a part of our paper that is on SP's authority. I think one of the contributions that we've made to this, and I think it's important that we should keep in mind what we're trying to do in all these debates, is we're trying to advance our knowledge on these topics. So, and one of the early things in our paper, in the Siddhanta section, by the way, we've divided our, for the main paper, we've divided our paper into five topics, Vishaya, Samshaya. Vishaya is the topic, Samshaya is the doubt, Purva Paksha is the other side. It literally means, the other side. The Siddhanta, the correct understanding, you can even call it Pratipaksha, which is this side. And then Sangati was the application. So very beginning of pure devotee is free from the 4 defects of the conditioned souls. Now, what we've done here is we've gathered the different various shastras, various statements of the shastras that affirm this. Very important. This is on page, what page is it on? 14, actually, beginning 14. Ishwaranam vachaha satyam, that the statements of the Lord's empowered servants are always true. Sat chastri kurvanti shastrani, great devotees make scriptures authoritative, and so forth. There are so many. But the one that I want to especially address here is the statements from Baladev Vidyabhushana and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur on the 4 defects of the conditioned soul. So this is on page 15, begins at the bottom of page 15. So there's a lot of Sanskrit there. So I'll just read what Baladev Vidyabhushana says. He says, Brahma, pramada, vipralipsa, and karanapatava. These are 4 faults found in an ordinary jiva. Among them, brahma means acceptance of an object to be different from what it is. For example, mistaking a pillar to be a person. Pramada means inattentiveness or having one's mind in another object by which one is not able to catch some song that is being sung just nearby. Vipralipsa means the desire to cheat others, knowingly not revealing a particular knowledge to one's student. Karanapatava means weakness of the senses by which, even after giving full attention to the mind, one cannot properly understand something. These are the 4 faults of ordinary jivas that do not produce prama, or valid knowledge. Among them, the 3 faults, brahma, pramada, karanapatavam, occur in relation to pratyaksha praman as well as anuman praman, which is rooted in pratyaksha praman. However, the fault vipralipsa occurs only in relation to shabda praman. So that's Baladevi Vibhushana on the 4 defects. And just going down, there's Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. This is on page 17. He says, to receive false information or to hear or speak incorrect information, Brahma and Pramada. Vipralipsa means the desire to cheat others. Karanapatava means incapability of the senses, not being able to see things situated at a distance, not being able to see things that are very small in size, not being able to identify color or form of some object as it happens in diseases like jaundice and so on, not being able to hear from a distance. And so our conclusion, what we've concluded from this, we say, quote, none of these faults are present in the words or activities of pure devotees because such devotees are directed by the Lord himself.
Okay. I read through this paper. It's great. Read the whole
Thank
thing.
you.
I actually read all of the papers there. Who wrote this one?
This one was a joint effort by all the members of the ISKCON India Scholars Board. It was pretty much an all hands on deck effort. It was like pretty much almost everyone was engaged in this, and we had a lot of lively discussions about this. And actually, it's quite a long paper because everybody just had this. Somebody had this thing to say, somebody had that thing to say, and it was going to be originally maybe no more than 15, 20 pages. But you know what they say, a camel is a horse put together by a committee. So this is
even so. This is and especially I appreciate the way that you use the Vyakarana. That's what it's called, the Vyakarana, the 5-sided logic of Vedanta.
Yes.
Nyaya. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I did think that the Purva Paksha section kind of like had a refutation of the opposing side rather than being like an actual just solid,
It was difficult to write that because it was just and when composing it, we tried to limit, a lot of people wanted to say this, wanted to respond to that, and we tried to really kind of like keep that out, and we didn't entirely succeed at that, but there was a lot more that people wanted to respond to directly in the Purva Paksha section. So
yeah. We were talking last night, Dana Devi and I, about like how will we approach this episode. And one kind of idea that I had was, I was like, I'm pretty sure I could present Kaunteya Prabhu's position. Having, he sent me the book early on. And the Purva Paksha in there was a bit... and you're saying he's backing away from it in there, and it's true, but like, I think the purest expression of this is basically, and as I'm going to say this, I also want to preface this with, this was said in ISKCON a number of times during his Divine Grace's manifest present, and every time he said it was the infiltration of Mayavad, he said it was envious God brothers influencing his disciples, and he expelled people for this. But basically, the thing here is basically what we're saying here with this argument is Śrīla Prabhupāda is a conditioned soul. He's a great personality, but he let's get real. He's a conditioned soul. He makes mistakes, you know? Like the hyperbole. I mean, the scriptural stuff is either like hyperbole or not applicable in this case. One of those two things.
Mhm.
That's the other way of reconciling the contradiction, right? Because one side of it is to say it's his humility. The other one is to say, hey, it's a fact.
Yeah, and I think that was really the foundation of our concern on Kaunteya's book, and let's be fair, these ideas, this isn't like it just kind of popped up, you know, suddenly. This isn't a new thing. This has been going on in ISKCON for a long time, actually. You know, we can trace this back to its roots back to before the turn of the century.
Yeah. I think the other thing here that I guess the author here could have make it explicit and very clear. Like in order for him to put Śrīla Prabhupada as a just maybe an ordinary man, you know, that can make mistakes, then give me the facts. What kind of mistakes did he do that you presenting that he actually done it factually? Because when we make this assertion of, oh, Śrīla Prabhupada is an ordinary man, obviously he didn't say that, but he said can make mistakes. These days, there are many people that are already preaching in that way, you know, just minimize him in order for people to come in and just accept, oh, he was just a human being, a normal human being. But they don't understand by lowering him to such a level of being an ordinary living entity, you're actually taking the power of the sacred books, all the things he has said. It invalidates.
Yeah, it's a Faustian bargain.
Yeah, so we cannot allow that, because right now, if I think about it as a person who's like, okay, he was an ordinary man, and whatever he said, well, he just said because he wanted to say something, like any man can speak anything, right? The moment they can open their mouth, they can say whatever they want and just sound so clever. But it doesn't mean they're really clever, right? It doesn't make sense. Well, I can get away with anything that I want. That is exactly that is leading this when someone is saying Śrīla Prabhupada can make mistakes. There is no examples there he can prove and say this is the type of.
I can give one. I can do the Purva
between the four.
Yeah. So
yeah.
You know the statement that women's. We got your question there, Shaman Tucker Leela. We'll get to it a little bit later. Women's brains grow up to 32 ounces. Men's brains go up to 64 ounces. I studied psychology at the Scottish Churches College, and my professor studied it, and that's what he said. So here's an example here. You know, I mean, is that a fact? I mean,
well, you know, and I want to point out, you know, Sridhar Srinivas Prabhu dealt with this nicely in his paper, actually, and he addresses this specific question, actually. The thing is that Śrīla Prabhupada's conclusions are always based on Shastra. They're based. They're transcendental. He may take some example, you know, he may use some material, some argument or some fact or something in the material, but his conclusion does not depend on it.
I understand that point, but he's still mistaken about that fact, which he's asserted as a thing. So, I mean, he says that, and so, you know, what are you saying? Are you saying that we should take some of Śrīla Prabhupada's statements as factual and other ones as not factual? I mean, he said that. That's a Śrīla Prabhupada Uvachar. He said that women's brains grow to 32 and men's brains grow to 64.
Yeah.
So was he mistaken, or is that a fact? Is that actually correct and accurate? Or was he mistaken? I'm going to pin you on this. See what you do with it. That's not the way you're supposed to say it. Okay, we can take there's knowledge or different in the world. There are different sources of knowledge that come,
and they may be right, they may be not right, and so forth. But Srila Prabhupada is still, the fact that he's using these does not mean that Srila Prabhupada's wrong. You know, there's some, you know, there may be some difference. You know, there may be some difference, but that doesn't mean that he that his conclusion is wrong. That there's some difference between the men and the women.
There was, I mean, yeah, I read Sridhar Srinivasa Prabhu's paper. It's very well written, very powerful. He makes that point there. Srila Prabhupada's grabbing whatever there is in the environment as like supportive, you know, in support of Siddhanta from Shastra. You know, like he also said, hey, you know, it's obvious that the moon is further away than the sun, which we get from the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam, because Monday comes after Sunday, which is kind of like that's not how he arrived at that conclusion.
I was going to raise that example.
But the thing is, Prabhu, that Monday is after Sunday. But, you know, like the brains thing, it's like now I understand that, you know, the fact that he made a mistake or he said something that wasn't factually correct doesn't invalidate the conclusion because it comes from Shastra. But that's a different point to the one that I'm making here. I mean, did Srila Prabhupada make a mistake when he made that statement? Or, you know, do men's brains grow to 64 ounces and women's to 32?
Well, I think that departs from the central question is, was Srila Prabhupada's views influenced by such things? You know, this is the specific question that Kaunteya Prabhu raises. You know, was this actually Srila Prabhupada's understanding? Was it based on what you know, his professor in the Scottish Church's college said, or was it based on Shastra? And the answer to that is it doesn't depend on what his professor said. Okay.
So now we've gone from the cannot make a mistake argument to the is culturally conditioned one, which is a adjacent question, right? Because here we can say he can present some evidence which is factually incorrect, but it's in support of some conclusion that comes from the Shastra. So have we abandoned the can't make a mistake? Are we abandoning that point?
We'll look at the shloka. Tad vasargo janataga viplavo yasmin pratishloka mabadyavatyapi. Okay, so there we're talking about mistakes. That yasmin pratishloka mabadyavatyapi. That even if the Shastra, that even if there's every line has a mistake in it, this is still, such Shastras are heard, sung, and accepted by purified men who are thoroughly honest. You know, it's like, you know, Srila Prabhupada, you know, he's, you know, there's one charming conversation he's talking. He says, you know, what is this naked skirt? Okay, there's no naked skirt word, but, you know what he means. So is it a mistake? And to put it in further perspective, let's look at Maharaj Parikshit. So Maharaj Parikshit, he was, you know, when he got offended by Shamaka Rishi, he thought that Shamaka Rishi was disrespecting him, and but that wasn't the case at all. So that would be an instance of Brahma, that he thinks that, you know, he's saying that upeksha, this object, you know, in Shamaka Rishi. Now, is that an example of a mistake? No, it's not an example of a mistake, because such devotees are under the control of the Lord. Arjuna being put into illusion, you know, that he's being put into ignorance. Is he? No, he's Gudakesh. So all these things that we see, these are, you know, it's not a mistake. It's not an illusion. It's not a case of Brahma, Pramada, Vipradapsar, Karananatapada. It's like this, you know, this is why I compared it with the moon landings, is that people, you know, they went to the moon.
No, they didn't.
Right, they didn't, but what I'm talking about is that it looks like, according to Pratyaksha and Anuman, confirmed by great scientists, this is a very uncontroversial thing in the, among scientists.
Are you kidding? Are you kidding? Here's a thought experiment for you. Imagine that we lived in a world where they never went to the moon. Wouldn't it be so different from the world that we live in? Imagine it. There would be no daily flights to the moon or anything. No, I mean, the world today that we live in is indistinguishable from a world in which they faked going to the moon. It's like literally indistinguishable from it. You can't argue that they faked the invention of computers or the iPhone or supersonic flight, but you can definitely argue there is no pratyaksha for the moon landing. It's all heard authoritative speaking.
I think
and
that,
common knowledge. Everyone knows, right?
I think that argument has currency among devotees, but outside, like right now, China and Russia are in a race to put a probe on the moon within the next day or so. So they think, their scientists think that they're going to the moon, and everybody else thinks they're going to the moon. We're kind of an outlier on this, and we kind of sidestep we're kind of sidestepping the issue on this, is that it's like a conspiracy theory that you had big government, that the FBI or the CIA, they actually kind of like
filmed it in Arizona.
Everything, yeah, it was filmed in Arizona.
Prabhupada was right into that. There's lots of conversations where he says that.
Yeah,
sorry. Yeah, let's.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that even for these examples, like for example, the Maharaj Parikshit thinking that Shamaka Rishi was disrespecting him when he really wasn't. That is, if it were a conditioned soul, that would be a fault. That he saw something in the object, he mistook the state of mind of Shamaka Rishi. He did not properly see it. But he's a pure devotee. He's under Krishna's protection, and that means that Krishna actually made that happen. So even ordinary faults, so-called ordinary faults, we're not allowed to. It's just not what it is. And this I find, is the big block that people have, is that they have difficulty accepting the Shabda Praman on this issue.
Can I make an argument against that though, Prabhu? Because
okay, yeah.
I mean, what you're saying here is that pure devotees make no errors; they make no mistakes. But then you say that any mistake that you observe, so one would derive from that like, oh, in that case, I would be able to tell who's a pure devotee because they make no mistakes. But then you say, oh no, they can make mistakes, but those are not really mistakes. And now you have an unfalsifiable, there's like literally no test for this now. Do you see what I'm saying?
The test is Shabda Praman. It's the evidence is Shabda Praman. There's no other. For some things, there's just no other evidence, and the Shabda Praman is the only direct evidence that we have. Everything else is actually tainted by these 4 defects of the conditioned souls.
Okay, I understand that, because even if I see he makes a mistake, I might be mistaken. So literally, I would have to be a pure devotee, and even then, I couldn't know, because like Parikshit Maharaj, I might make a mistake that's not a mistake. So literally, Pratyaksha is not a way of understanding it. But then what's the Shabda Praman for that Śrīla Prabhupāda is a pure devotee, liberated, makes no mistakes, is not a conditioned soul?
Yeah, so there's two. An object can be understood. This is described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that every object can be understood in 2 ways: by its rupa lakshana, by its inherent qualities, and by its tatastha lakshana, by its activities. Okay, so Śrīla Prabhupāda, yes, at times he acted like what appears to be an ordinary soul, but at other times he acted in a very transcendental way. So there was a discussion that this was conveyed to me recently by Basa Ghosh Prabhu. It was a reminiscence from Rameshwar Prabhu, that he was at that there was a press conference. Prabhupada was there, he was there, and so it was asked, Prabhupada, how you know so much, because they're talking about his books, how you know so much. And so And so Rameshwara Prabhu was giving some answer that he was just, that he studied, he's represented the acharyas, he's taken this. And Prabhupada said, no, Krishna is actually giving me this information. He said directly. And another time, another story, this was from a story I recollect from Prithu Prabhu, that I don't remember all the details exactly, but he and some devotees had to see Śrīla Prabhupada one time, and Śrīla Prabhupada was asleep, but they had to ask him some important question. And so they went to, a servant who was saying, that we have to talk to Śrīla Prabhupada about this. He says, well, go talk to him. He says, well, he's asleep. I don't want to disturb him. He says, just because he's sleeping doesn't mean he's asleep. And so Śrīla Prabhupada addressed their question, even though he was asleep. He was in a state of sleep, but he was talking with him. He was fully cognizant of what they were talking about. So, Tatashta Lakshana, that these are these kind of extraordinary incidents. They don't happen all the time, which is why they're extraordinary, but they do happen. And so we can, so these give us faith that Śrīla Prabhupada is indeed not a person of this world. He's definitely, a pure devotee, somebody on a different level of consciousness that we're just not on.
Yeah, that reminds me, the examples that you given reminds me of the book of Tranakarta Prabhu, where, him was so attached to Śrīla Prabhupada, and he got some incredible experiences when he was with Śrīla Prabhupada that nobody else could see. And that reminds me of Śrīla Prabhupada will never be any ordinary person, because if he desires to show himself in such a way to certain souls that perhaps they have such a great karma, they have such a purity, is different in the eyes of the person compared to the person that is not in the same level as the other person. Śrīla Prabhupada is just gonna play the character of, let's say, as an Indian man. Yet, still with all of that, with all what he has created in this world, it is extraordinary. No man of that age could do anything as such. There is no one man in this world that can compare to him. Isn't that enough to just prove to any person, Śrīla Prabhupada is not any ordinary person? I can hardly be thinking clearly in my day if I don't have a good sleep. And Śrīla Prabhupada, 2-3 hours of sleep, that was enough for him. And like you just said in your example, he was asleep, but still he was engaging in such a conversation. Who does that? Unless someone that is with some mental issues and the delusional, they can just talk about it. But even delusional person speaks such a thing that are incoherent.
I have a doubt. Do you want to say, sorry, Prabhu, do you want to respond any or reflect anything
Well,
about
I just
that?
want to say those by Dana Devi Mataji, those are all just additional examples that just confirm our conviction that Śrīla Prabhupada was a transcendental, pure devotee who was in no way affected by the three modes of the material nature. So many of those things. It's just what he accomplished was incredible, and it explains why he could accomplish so many incredible things. Just even the preaching, he's coming. I saw some nice praise by different scholars, academic scholars of Śrīla Prabhupada. They compared him to Jesus. Jesus, he preached among his own people and in the same language, and he accomplished, of course, much. But Śrīla Prabhupada came to another country in a different culture, in a language that he wasn't, that it wasn't his native tongue, and yet somehow he converted, he purified, brought so many people to Krishna consciousness. That's very, very, very high praise coming from the scholars. No ordinary man can imitate it, and that just says what is the glories of an Uttama Adhikari. Anuttama Adhikari, Sarva Bhuteshu Ya Pashyat Bhagavad Bhavamatmanaha, Bhutani Bhagavat Yatman Yesha Isha Bhagavadottama. That such a person, an Uttama Adhikari, can see within everybody Krishna and everybody situated within Krishna. Therefore, he knew how to perfectly engage everybody in Krishna's service, whoever it was. It might be a hippie, might be a high-class man, it might be everybody. And that just, that the secret to Prabhupada's success was that he was on that topmost platform. Even though he was acting in the capacity of a Madhyama Adhikari preacher, he was actually Uttama Adhikari, which is why he, so wonderful things would happen. He knew how to engage everybody perfectly.
Yeah,
So when
only
we-
his presence. Only his presence, he mesmerized people. Is there any, even in the Hollywood world, is there any guy that is so famous that can have such a mesmerizing and powerful impact in every person that is finding themselves so lost in this material world and questioning themselves, what is the purpose of my life, what I'm meant to be doing in my life, and bam, he just gets it there. There is not such a man in this world. And how is possible knowing and reading and hearing everything that Śrīla Prabhupada has been doing? We can say he can make mistakes. How can we even say that?
How would we be
Absolutely.
able to evaluate it?
Well, I guess it's look at what he has done. That is the only way, that is the only example you can see as myself. I can see it's like, he is not an ordinary man. I cannot, even with having some intelligence, I cannot even accomplish such a thing.
So
Absolutely.
I'd like to bring my doubt forward.
Okay.
At the beginning, it was, you explained some of the background of your disagreement with your former guru. It was about homosexual marriage. This book, Garudadas, Dr. Graham M. Schweig's paper, When the Master Speaks, all seem to be part of this kind of like culture war. And it seems to be a broader culture war that's taking place across the English-speaking world, at least, dividing, into these two kind of like the progressive and the conservative kind of positions.
Mm-hmm.
This does seem to mirror that, and it's a way of kind of constructing, a liberal progressive position that's still compatible with Krishna consciousness by taking out some of the things that Prabhupada.
Hello?
The position that you've been espousing does seem to be a pick and choose conservative position based out of Prabhupada's thing. And the reason I'm glad you brought up the moon landing as it was kind of unintentional, but somehow it got in there. How could we miss it? It seems like Śrīla Prabhupada's statements on the moon landing being faked and filmed in Arizona are a step too far for you. So my doubt about that then is like, is this not a case of just like, we're going to invent a meta theory about Śrīla Prabhupada's statements to enable us to take the parts of it that we want and leave out the parts we don't want? Like, let's take the, Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead and leave out women are less intelligent, or let's take women are less intelligent and should be protected at every stage of life, and Krishna's the supreme personality of Godhead, but leave out the moon landing was faked and filmed in the Arizona desert. Like, isn't it just, aren't you doing the same thing there?
No, it's not the same thing, because because again, one of our standards is that we have to reconcile, we have to reconcile our pramanas. Okay. And, and one of the things about a spiritual, a transcendental worldview is that not everything, our understanding of material phenomena is not going to precisely map to what the materialists, think that the material world is supposed to be. And this is why we need Shastra Unitvat. As Karl Marx once said, if appearances were identical with truth, then there would be no need for science. So we can expand that further, that, that science being also, also similarly also susceptible to these four defects of conditioned souls. In the same way, without Shastra, one cannot understand things as they are. Let me give you an example. Just like mind, is mind simply a conglomeration of different things that are actually separate, or is it its own entity? Well, according to Shastra, mind is its own entity. It's a distinct entity, is a distinct material element. And there's simply no way to understand that about the mind except through the Shastra. It's just not within our capabilities, even material capabilities, to understand that the mind is a specific element. So so what we're introducing here, this comes down to pramans. Just like the Buddhists, the modern scientists today, modern scholars today accept only pratyaksha and anuman, but we accept that there's shabda, that in order to understand anything properly in its proper context, one has to actually also understand through shabda.
In the case of the moon landings, to go back to it, are you not now elevating like the testimony of non-Krishna conscious Asuric leaders and their intelligence and media apparatus, from a very small niche of, compartmentalized need to know militarized organizations projecting this, this is what's happened on the world? Are you not now elevating that as praman above the statements of Śrīla Prabhupada? Like Śrīla Prabhupada says they faked it, they filmed it in Arizona. I mean, I guess what I'm pointing to here is like, I'm kind of like, maybe Prabhupada is a conditioned soul, maybe he can be mistaken, but let me look into it. And the more I look into it, I find out that if you follow Śrīla Prabhupada, not only do you become a conservative, you actually become a conspiracy theorist. It's an inconvenient kind of like, it makes you not only unpopular with the left, but also with the conservative right as well.
I don't think so, because Prabhupada didn't deny that they went somewhere, okay, that they landed somewhere, that they went, off the surface of the moon. He just said that they didn't land on the moon. He suggested that perhaps they went to, they landed on Rahu or something, that he didn't say that they didn't go anywhere, that it was filmed. I don't recall Prabhupada saying that they filmed it. Whether he did or not, I don't know. But just because we have shabda doesn't mean that we're denying that pratyaksha and anuman are totally false. They're real, but our understanding of them may not be proper is not proper without the support of shabda. So the example I gave, like mind, is mind just simply a epiphenomenon of a bunch of separate elements that are acting together, or is it its own element? The Shastra is clear that it's an element.
Okay, to draw it back to Kaunteya's book, he's making the. So where we started from was in the comments, people like, is the devotee makes no mistakes or anything? But what I hear out of this is like, my position is like more extreme than either of them. Kaunteya's position is he can make mistakes. And then your position is he can appear to make mistakes, which functionally basically is the same thing. So let me throw this out there and see if you want to catch it. It seems to me that Kaunteya wants to use his particular theology of embodiment to make a particular point, because at the end of the day, it seems as though your theory and his theory are functionally indistinguishable. He says he can make mistakes, and you say he can appear to make mistakes. Okay. So where's the actual difference?
Yeah, the difference is in how we treat this issue. So even from the point of view, even if we're dealing with a guru, somebody who's a guru and an acharya, an authorized guru and acharya, who is not on the liberated platform, he may be strictly following the disciplic succession, but not liberated. The etiquette, as described in Manusmriti, is that one should that it is sinful for a disciple to either blaspheme him, and Ninda is understood to be accusing him of faults that he doesn't actually have, and parivad. This is another one, is actually finding faults in him or accusing him of faults that are actually in him. So even if you're talking about somebody, an acharya, who is not a liberated soul, or not yet a liberated soul anyway, but he's on the, he's a properly situated sadhaka, you are forbidden from doing either. You can't blaspheme him.
So hang on.
You can't. Well, I don't want to use the word, but you can't find fault in him.
So are you saying that Kaunteya Prabhu could be right, but as a matter of etiquette, he shouldn't do it? That's parivar.
Well, that's one of the things. He said that we should distance ourselves from what Śrīla Prabhupada said. We should kind of say we don't do it. We should, that he's, he had fault, like that. So the Shastras, even in the case of somebody who's not a liberated soul, prohibit us from doing that kind of thing. First
Prabhu,
of all,
didn't we start this with Kaunteya's refusal to debate you because you renounced your own guru for that very reason? Is that not parivar?
I think on his part, it's just he's just being opportunistic. Sorry to say, but in his 2013 book on the female Diksha Guru issue, he actually gives my name in the credits for having helped him, although he never actually reached out to me and helped me, and he actually quoted in different ways, in unfaithful ways, things that I had written in emails. So back then, that was 2013. He's, did he not know that I had, renounced him or not? I'm quite sure he did. So it's just being, sorry. He's.
Yeah, it could be, right? Like, there's plenty of people who refuse to debate me, and I'd like to give a shout out to Radha Ramandas, who got the first comment in here. He was happy to come on and go head to head, and I respect that. And but my point here is the parivad, is it called?
Yeah, parivad.
Yeah, is not your own renouncing of your guru an example of exactly that? Like, he might be right, but he shouldn't say it as a matter of etiquette. Like, okay, maybe that is a fault in your guru, but should not then, to be consistent with that position, wouldn't you also be forbidden from doing what you did?
Well, just in terms of, briefly, I just want to make the point that in terms of discussing Kaunteya's book, this is a bit of a distraction, but to address it, since it keeps coming up, what about the case that assumes that the case was that the renunciation was illegitimate in the first place? And that's and that I dispute, and many people dispute that. That it was that if your guru is departing from his guru, then you can't follow him. That's
so you're saying, I'm not sure how to reconcile these two things, because you said that parivada means that if there is actually, so ninda means accusing someone of a defect that's not there, so that's like a blasphemy of the guru, and that. But then there's parivada, which is even if the fault is there, you still shouldn't say it.
That doesn't cover all faults. This was this was what the pastime of Bali Maharaj with Shukracharya illustrated. Mm-hmm. So the specific shloka in this regard, this is from Mahabharata. It's I'm trying to remember the let's see, 1 second here. It's the Gurur apyavaliptasya karyakaramajānataha utpata pratipanasya parityago vidhiyate. So this was spoken by Bhishma Dev when he was just before fighting Parashuram, over the question of whether he should marry Amba, give up his vow of brahmacharya and marry Amba. So he says that a guru who is arrogant, who cannot distinguish between what is right and wrong and is on the wrong path, he is to be given up. So the Paribad does not invalidate that. And in this case, Parashuram, he wasn't like very, he was of course, Parashuram, very elevated person, but the issue was he was giving or Shukracharya, he was giving wrong direction. And therefore Bali Maharaj was justified in giving him up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the question. And I think just as a practical issue, in terms of a leadership issue, no one wants to really address that because Maharaj, he's a dear friend, very dear to many people, especially among his god brothers and colleagues and so forth like that. And if you really kind of like want to come down in a decision, then you have to come to face this issue. Was his instruction and was his conviction, which he still stands behind, the gay marriage, the gay everything like that, the gay marriage, is that legitimate or not? And I addressed this in an essay in 2007, which is still up on the Dandavat's website. I said that I was not concerned so much with the conclusion, the specific conclusion he came to, but with the process by which he came to that conclusion. And I think now with Kaunteya's book, which follows closely the logic that Maharaj outlined in his 2005 paper on homosexuality, it follows very closely the logic of that. So I think that my concerns have been more than justified.
First of all, I acknowledge your courage and your conviction in taking that stance, because it's obviously for you a controversial and risky move to make, right? Because it doesn't have the agreement. It's like nobody is bold and far-sighted and acting with integrity and conviction if they drop their guru after he's like fallen and being denounced, and like they basically make everyone leave him.
But let me I just want to add one thing further here.
Yeah, it's
not that I absolutely hate him or I have a personal issue. It is not a personal issue. In fact, over the years I found myself in the odd position of actually defending him on some points. Especially some people have said that he's loose with women or something like that, or female disciples. And as someone who's actually been in the position of personally serving him, I never saw any of that kind of behavior. And, truthfully, he was always a gentleman like that. But, and second of all, I felt that I had to defend him because when you get into all these issues, he did this salacious thing, that salacious thing, that allegation, that distracts from the idea that really needs to be addressed, that he's propagating, that's not right. And we really need to have, look at that. So, two things. One, that I just don't like it when somebody who I might be opposed to is being unfairly blasphemed, criticized. I just don't like that. And second thing is it distracts from actually being able to discuss the truth. I think this is like, within our leadership, in our society, I think this is a blind spot. We're very attentive to personal moral fall downs, but when it comes to philosophical issues, we tend to look the other way until they become big social movements that we can't do anything about. I think that's our Achilles heel. And Prabhupada was just the opposite. with his disciples who were, they had their moral shortcomings. He was very lenient with them. But when it was philosophical deviation, he was very strict, acted like fire immediately. So in that respect, we're not very good at following Śrīla Prabhupāda's example. And I'm talking in terms of like our society. So, it's, and I have to be honest too, that Hridayananda Maharaj, among practically all of his colleagues, he's the only one, he's practically speaking, the only one who's writing, long, papers, that are trying to address certain issues in depth and breadth. And, who else, practically speaking, who else is trying to do that? You have to give credit where credit is due. But I think the specific idea is that he outlined in his paper, and this is about Prabhupada being right only when he speaks according to Shastra, and probably and possibly mistaken when he speaks about something else. That's directly there in his 2005 paper, which is basically—
Isn't that your position?
Huh?
Isn't that your position? That's
No,
Sridhar
that's not.
Srinivas's whole thing, right? It's like—
No. The Srinivas Prabhu's thing, and this is our thing, is that Śrīla Prabhupada, whatever he's saying, whatever position he's taking, is done in accordance with the Shastras. Sometimes we may not have access to those Shastras to know anything about it, to actually assess that. But according to the Shastras itself, that adhikar is given to the Dharmagya, the person who knows what is the Dharma. Dharmagya samaya pramanam vedascha. That's from Apastanda Dharma Sutra. The Manusamhita also, also declares. He says, that 12th chapter, shloka 108. The question arises: what do you do? Who is to say what is dharma on points of dharma that are not found in the Shrutis or Smritis? And the answer given is that it's the Dharmagya. It's the Shishta Brahmana. Anamna teshu dharmeshu katam syat iti ched bhavet. Yam Shishta Brahmana bruyuhu sadharmaha syat ashankitaha. So that adhikar is given actually to a qualified brahmana to say what is dharma in the absence of points in the Shruti or Smriti. So, Prabhupada, whether, from that dharmic perspective or from the perspective of a pure devotee, whatever he's speaking has authority. And that was really the gist of our main paper, of the official response, is that Śrīla Prabhupada's words, that in his books, that's to be accepted as smriti, actually on the level of shastras like Chaitanya Charitamrita, Manusmriti, and so forth like that. Hari Bhakti Vilas, Śrīla Prabhupada's words in his books. And then Śrīla Prabhupada's words outside of this books. He's talking about, should we use the telephone, use a dictaphone and everything. This comes under sadachar. Should we offer obeisances, how to cook for Krishna, all these things. That's sadachar. So this is a very important shloka in the Srimad Bhagavatam 7.11.7. Srimad Bhagavatam 7.11.7, where where Narada Muni, he's describing what is the source of knowledge of Dharma. So, Dharma mulyam hi Bhagavan, ye sarva mayo, sarva veda mayo, sarva veda mayo gatihi, smritim cha tadvidam. Let me get this here. It's important to quote this here. 7:11:7. Yeah. So, yes, smritim cha tadvidam rajan yena chatma prasidati The Supreme Being, the personality of God, is the essence of all knowledge, the root of all religious principles, the memory of the great authorities. O King Yudhisthira, this principle of religion is understood as evidence. On the basis of this religious principle, everything is satisfied, including one's mind, soul, and even one's body. So if you deep dive into this purport, Śrīla Prabhupada brings Marshall's, a number of other shlokas, and in particular one to take note of is his quote of Yajnavalkya Smriti. So Yajnavalkya Smriti is, this particular shloka is famous because it outlines these different levels of the Shastric authority. You have the Vedas, Shruti Smriti Sadacharaha, Swasya Cha Priyamatmanaha, Samyak Sankalpa Jaha Kamo Dharma Mula Midam Smritam. So you have the Shrutis, that's the Vedas, you have the Smritis. These are works composed by persons who know the Vedas, by Dharmagyas. Then you have the Shruti Smriti Sadachara, so Sadachar. So that's the example, the exemplary behavior of the devotees. So, these are all the things that we learn it. And so people, in the early days of ISKCON, especially after Prabhupada's disappearance, but even during Prabhupada's time, people were asking, what did Prabhupada do? How did he do this? How did he do this? That's sadachar. That's a source of knowledge of Dharma. And then preferences. That's another one. This is swasya cha priyamatmanaha. So his whatever he prefers. Śrīla Prabhupada liked to see his devotees dress in dhoti and sari. He said they could wear karmic clothes for distribution, but he liked to see them dress in dhoti and sari. And therefore, to put Prabhupada in the center for ISKCON is to also observe his preferences and honor his preferences. So it's authorized on so many. It's authorized on so many levels. So
there's a question I'd like to bring in from the viewers. I mean, there's been a bunch of things in there. This one's kind of it's off the topic of the book to a degree, but I think this is a really important.
Could we maybe give preference to those that are on the topic of the book?
Yeah, we can do that. How about if I just bring this question in? Okay. Yeah. This was a question. I have this question myself as well. It's like, I was acknowledging you for your courage and your conviction and taking the move that you took, the stance that you took, and history will be the judge, right, of where that lands in the future. But how do you do that? Like, how? Because the person's asking, like, Hridayananda Maharaj was made a GBC emeritus, and he's not, like, it's not acknowledged generally. People don't have agreement for that, and yet you've taken that step. And I asked this question, and this person's asking to hear, because a lot of people actually, I don't know if it was your writing, you were talking about the split in ISKCON, like it's destined for like a schism. Have you been writing about that, or was that someone else?
I think I haven't been writing about that for quite some time, so probably someone else.
Okay, but you did write about that? Maybe you were writing about that like in the mid 2000s or something.
Yeah, if you remember, I composed a paper about this was in a response to the creation of ISKCON's constitution at the time, and I basically said that this is not the right time to actually be talking the constitution, because the ISKCON is still kind of like being roiled by a lot of controversial matters. And so my main thesis in that, if we want to get back to the culturally conditioned, by the way, this is one part of the paper we haven't talked about, which is probably worth talking about, is that if we're going to posit that Śrīla Prabhupada is culturally conditioned, then what about the author who's trying to make that point themselves also being culturally conditioned? And then can also...
Exactly. It's only the cultural conditioning that you have that differs from his that shows up for you as cultural conditioning, right? The things you agree with him on, or in other words, in other words, it's your own cultural conditioning that has you say, well, that's cultural conditioning. Otherwise, you're like a fish swimming in water, right? So that even that charge is a function of the reader or the author's cultural conditioning that they bring to this thing.
Which is why it's so important, just as a general thing in the society, in the ISKCON society, that the common currency for these discussions really should be Shastra. Okay, we can also, Prabhupada said, so many things, but also Shastra as well. Shastra, Sadhu, and Guru, like that, because you can also find a Prabhupada quote to support almost any idea that you want. So there has to be some sort of better, like a more elevated way of approaching this. So I sincerely believe, and I would agree with Kaunteya Prabhu in that the Shastra is the center. He quotes Prabhupada. This is a statement in his purport to Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 20, text 352, where Prabhupada says that among Sadhu, Shastra, and Guru, Shastra is the center of all. That's very important, and he's right about that. But this is a very important point in our paper, and across all of our papers, is that there's a hierarchy of pramans, and even what a sadhu says is also based on the Shastra, even though we may not know what that Shastra is. It's like, you go to a doctor and you get medical advice, that I should do that. There is some Shastra or there's some medical grant that supports his opinion, but you may not know it, and you may not even be qualified to understand it. So that's the position of a Dharmagya. So therefore, that assumption is made. That's why he can say. That's why he's considered competent to make decisions on points that are not found in either the Shrutis or the Smritis.
So basically, what I can see developing here, this is just my own analysis of it. You were talking about this way back when. And it's funny that they're still trying to do the ISKCON constitution, Now it's we're not even going to comment on that anymore, because it's we did that commentary 15, 20 years ago. But, you were talking about the schism between the two back then, and it seems to have really developed that way. You have the Kaunteya's book, Hridayananda Maharaja's presentations, and that's really developing, it has a significant following. And then you have on the other side, the Indian ISKCON Scholars Board bringing out this paper with this other position here. And these two positions, to a degree, seem to be irreconcilable. And then, you have the split, very manifest right here, in that you've renounced your guru who's standing on one side of that. And yet both are still in ISKCON at this point in history, but that fault line is running through the middle. How do you see this? Can this be reconciled?
It might not be, we should try to do it, because it's our tradition to try to reconcile these things. But one of the things that, one of the things that in our past that have been done on certain issues is what's called a Shastrartha. So a very famous one was the difference between the Svakyavadis and the Parakitavadis in our history. So actually what happened, the Parakitavadis, they argued that the Parakya Ras was the highest, expression of love for Krishna, and the Svakyavadis, they disagreed. So during that Shastrartha, there was I can't remember the details. Bhakti Vikash Maharaj has given a very nice summary in one video. Can perhaps find that later. But the gist of it is that on all the different sides, the best presenters, the best minds on each side came together, and they had these public meetings, and they would discuss and argue these points. And it went on for months, and people could go and hear these arguments on either side. And so finally, the Svakyavadis, they admitted defeat, and they actually signed a affidavit in the Muslim court, in the Muslim government, that they accept that they are wrong, that they give all their disciples over to the Parakiyavadis, and that and the controversy went away because the Swakiyavad went away. It was settled. So the modus operandi of deciding these things is that they're done in kind of like these committees, kind of like at a high level, and you don't hear anything about it. And then, all of a sudden there's a resolution that, that is based on kind of like these secret, deliberations on Shastra. And then, basically you've done something, and maybe you'll get around to explaining what happened, but that's a very, I would say, unsatisfactory way. And it's not the way that we've done this before and we've settled these issues. So I think that a Shastrarta on some of these issues is long overdue.
Shastrarta, a scriptural smackdown, I think, is the technical.
Basically,
translation.
that's what it is. It's a scriptural. It's a scriptural smackdown. Now, Shastrarta is not just like a free for all, but actually you have, qualified judges. People to actually, who are qualified to judge things. So, I think that at least those who are in positions of authority should seriously consider sponsoring a sober and well-conducted Shastrarta on a number of these issues. I think that could go a long way toward healing, or at least resolving some of these matters. That's one way.
Well, that was a request around the female Diksha Guru issue, right? Was to have exactly that.
Yeah, and because it's part of our tradition.
Right.
Why shouldn't?
Well, why shouldn't we? Because, if you're a consequentialist, if you're a pragmatist, if you're arguing from the outcomes, you're only interested in doing that if you're going to win. So good judges are the ones who agree with us, right? That would be a consequentialist approach to that. Which I think, is that in the paper? It talks about that consequentialism.
Oh yeah. We have a thing. We propose that as a possible explanation, but that's a very important thing, because the consequentialist argument basically doesn't depend at all on, for censoring Śrīla Prabhupada, doesn't depend at all on anything, the truth of anything that Śrīla Prabhupada said. It's just that people are reacting negatively to it. So we have to.
It's preaching, Prabhu.
Yeah, but Śrīla Prabhupada also wanted to. He also wanted to be provocative as well. He wanted to challenge the status quo. You can't preach unless you're countercultural.
Exactly.
Because if you're cultural,
Exactly.
Yeah.
The moon landings are faked. I'll tell you, history will be the judge of this. Prabhupada nailed it with that. It's too spicy for most people, but he's on the money. Yeah, he might be a conditioned soul, but when you look into it, you're like, oh, he might have made mistakes, but that's not one of them. He nailed it.
Oh, I don't want to hear that Śrīla Prabhupada is a conditioned soul. I can't bear, even
I didn't say
theoretically.
that. I didn't say that. I said he might be.
Even to say he might be, this is why this is such a dangerous thing, is that because just like, for example, when the Mayavadi sannyasis in Benares were blaspheming Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Chandrasekhar and Tapana Mishra approached Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and says, please do something about this. And Prabhupada in the purport, this is like 7th chapter, like about the 51st, 52nd shloka. He says that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that because they asked Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to do something about it, shows that they were Kanishta Adhikaris. Because an Uttama Adhikari, he is he's fully conversant with the Shastras, he's fully conversant with the logic and argument defeat. But Tapana Mishra and Chandrasekhara, because they weren't competent, they were recognized as Kanishta Adhikaris. But he says even a Kanishta Adhikari cannot tolerate the blasphemy of a devotee or the Lord. So it's on this point, this is a very thing, to call Śrīla Prabhupada or to suggest that he is a conditioned soul is intolerable. And therefore therefore if this is not disposed of and this is allowed to kind of go on, that you're going to have some group of people in ISKCON, especially a group of influential people of ISKCON, advancing the idea that Śrīla Prabhupada was a conditioned soul, you are going to have a split.
Yeah, that's why I asked at the beginning, is this an illegal question? Like, is it offensive even to ask that? And it seems as though this is my take on this. It's like, I don't think it's an illegitimate question to ask. However,
I don't either. I don't
You
either
can't-
think it's a legitimate question to ask.
yeah. But the thing is, you can't arrive at the conclusion that he is and still claim to represent him as he is, because he doesn't represent. Although Kaunteya Prabhu makes the argument at the beginning that he does say that. And so, in a sense, it's kind of like, but for me personally, you know, like, you know, we went to a program the other day and someone was there preaching and, you know, the question came up from someone who was there about the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verse 40, purport, Chanakya, according to Chanakya Pandit, women are generally not trustworthy, less intelligent. You know, it was like how to deal with that. And the way that this preacher dealt with it was to say, Śrīla Prabhupāda's culturally conditioned by his time, something that went into that. I just was like, I'm going to stop you right there. I was just like, I'm going to stop you right there. I don't have a problem if you disagree with Śrīla Prabhupada, but don't pretend that you're representing him when you do it. And I said, where did Śrīla Prabhupada, and he said, oh, well, you know, Śrīla Prabhupada said that my no one can fault my translations, but my purport's something. I said, where did he say that? And he said, in the Veda base. I'm like, that's like saying he said it in a book. Where did he ever? I said, look, he never said that. Śrīla Prabhupada never instructed his disciples to discriminate in his statements and his purports like that. He didn't, like, if you're presenting him as he is, you just say what he said and then you back it up and you show how it's true and you demonstrate it and everything. That's as it is. Or if you want to critique it and then have an academic deconstruction of it, sure, I got no problem with that. Be a demon, be a Mayavadi, whatever. Have your academic framework and, you know, bring Emil Durkheim's analysis of Prabhupada or whatever it is. You know, Marxian deconstruction of Prabhupada. Sure, but don't do that and pretend that you're representing Prabhupada.
Exactly. I totally agree with you. And to be honest, it is also a fact that some people, perhaps quite a few people, can be insensitive and not presenting Prabhupada in a correct light. Even they're quoting Śrīla Prabhupada verbatim. That is certainly there, and that needs to be whenever that happens, that needs to be corrected. But I think that Kaunteya's book is not talking about those kinds of things generally. I think he's talking about just Śrīla Prabhupada's statements as, you know, just as they are, even if they are presented soberly, but presented as.
He does, though, raise that as an issue, doesn't he, about being out of context, taken out of context?
He does, and I think that you know, and there are some places. There's some places in the book, quite a few places, where I think he does a good job of making apologetic arguments. Apology in the sense that, you know, he's, you know, in the formal sense, where he's saying that, well, this is what Prabhupada actually means. That we know you're hostile to him already, but this is what he actually means, and if you understand it like this, then, you know, you should be, you know, you should change your mind about it. I think in some places he does that, but I think that rhetorically, I think that it's somewhat of a cover, whether intentional or not, to you know, to actually say that, well, Prabhupada really was off on, you know, on some of these ideas. And you know, that he was off on some of these ideas, and then also to introduce the pragmatic argument that it doesn't matter what Prabhupada said anyway. People are having a negative reaction, and so we have to stuff him, treat him like the crazy uncle, and stuff him in the attic.
Yeah. There's a bit of that. There's a bit of that out there, you know. But one thing about this, Śrīla Prabhupada, you know, it's legitimate to say maybe he was wrong, but let's just take the case that Śrīla Prabhupada's a pure devotee and everything he says is like A grade, like cuts through, you know. It's like the telescope, it's the transformative lens for looking at the world and applying to the world. Would we not then not be afraid of like analyzing that and say, hey, even if you say, you know, it's like the chapter 5.4 of the Bhagavad Gita, you know, where Krishna says that those who say that analytical study of the material world and karma yoga lead to different results, you know, are mistaken. Like, like let's just theoretically take the case, maybe Srila Prabhupada could be wrong. Let's see if he is. Let's take what he said and then let's go all the way down, And that's really if you're doing an apology for it, like you said, let's demonstrate, how when this is understood correctly, it reveals things about the world that are mind-blowing, life-changing, should we not be afraid of doing that? We don't care whether you're thinking.
You mean kind of presenting a purva paksha and then addressing addressing the purva paksha? Is that what you're?
I mean, in the sense of we can admit a theory that says Śrīla Prabhupada could be a conditioned soul and he could be mistaken, and then now we're going to empirically analyze what he said and how it applies to the world, and we should find that.
Yeah, well, first of all, the problem right there is that you can't simply empirically analyze these things, because such a thing. First of all, such a position, okay, that whether someone is mistaken or not, is not subject to. You can get hints and everything like that, but simply by empirical understanding, one cannot actually come to the right conclusion on that. There's a very nice shloka in Bhagavatam. This is Canto 1, Chapter 11, Text 38. So this is very nice. It says, Etad ishanam ishasya prakritisto pitad gunahi na yujyate saratmaster yata buddhis tadashraya. This is the divinity of the personality of Godhead. He is not affected by the qualities of material nature, even though he is in contact with them. Similarly, the devotees who have taken shelter of the Lord do not become influenced by the material qualities. Now, the context for this shloka is Krishna's returning to Dwaraka. So he's just left Hastinapur and he's coming to Dwaraka. Now, what is happening is that Krishna, he's meeting so many people, citizens of Dwaraka, he's meeting ministers, and finally he's meeting his family members, and finally at the very end he's meeting his wives. Okay, so it's pointed out that especially in the previous shloka, I'll just read the translation. It says, the common materialistic conditioned souls speculate that the Lord is one of them. Out of their ignorance, they think that the Lord is affected by matter, although he is unattached. And so the next shloka, which I had read before, he says that the divinity of the Lord is that although he's interacting with the material nature, he is unaffected by it. And it says that his devotees, his unalloyed devotees, are also similarly unaffected by it. So if you look at this, if you try to analyze it empirically, like the common materialistic conditioned souls, you will see that Krishna is acting like an ordinary man. That he's like one of them. He's affected by things but to understand what is really the situation, you have to hear from the Shastra. You have to hear from the Acharyas that this is not the case.
So it's really an a priori thing. It's like you have a preconceived conclusion, and then it's like there's nothing that can disprove that.
It's Shabda. This is the thing, is that this is the real blockage that I find that devotees are having difficulty accepting, is that among the three pramanas, the Pratyaksha, Anuman, and Shabda is the
primary.
only one that is considered direct evidence. Everything else, Pratyaksha and Anuman, is considered indirect.
Mm-hmm.
So the difficulty really comes down to accepting whether we're going to accept the authority of these statements or not. And so then this brings us really to chapter 16 in the Bhagavad Gita. It's very interesting. And this is really kind of like, I think conceptually, people who have been trained, and not necessarily people born in the West, but people who've been trained in the enlightenment values of the West. One of the key features of the Enlightenment is that there's no such thing as fixed nature. There's no such thing as a fixed human nature. Now, we get to Bhagavad Gita, this is radically opposed to that idea, because here, where Krishna is talking about suras and asuras. He's talking about the nature. And one of the key differences between the suras and the asuras is that the asuras are going to accept the authority of the Lord. They're going to accept the Shastras. So therefore, by the very end of the 16th chapter, Krishna is saying, Ya Shastra vidimutraja vartate kamakarataha nasa siddhim avapnoti nasukam na param gatim. That that those who do not accept the Shastras, that you do not accept the Shastra Vidis, they cannot, they cannot attain perfection, they cannot attain the supreme destination, and similarly like that. And that's a function that actually is a function of the nature. Do you have the nature or the swabhav of a sura, or do you have the swabhav of an asura? So the blockage, is in accepting this authority, that's the only way we can understand some of these things.
Yeah, I can see making a case for Western people today. They're like, and then basing it on Anuman and Pratyaksha, and you can reprove everything from Shastra there. You can do it. However, you can't get around the fact that Śrīla Prabhupāda's presentation is like Shastra Yonitvat, straight out of like Vedanta Sutra, it's like that's the proof. Like that's like
it's the truth.
It's the epistemology itself. It's really an epistemic battle.
It is, and I think that this is one of the points, very important fundamental premises in Kaunteya Prabhu's book, is that he associates perfection with omniscience and omnipotence and omnipresence, but at least omniscience. And when we consider the definitions given of the 4 defects of the conditioned souls and a liberated soul who's beyond these defects, the condition of being omniscient is irrelevant. Let's consider, for example, Mother Yashoda. Okay, she's not omniscient. In fact, she had no idea about Krishna's universal form, and so when Krishna, he showed her that, that all these how great he is, that actually disturbed her devotion, and then he withdrew that knowledge, so that she could reciprocate with him perfectly. So, this ignorance or not knowing, so-called not knowing something, about Krishna, that's not ignorance, that's perfection in the case of a devotee. In the case of the rest of us, not knowing something is ignorance, if we're not on that platform, if we're still conditioned souls. So perfection is, so omniscience is completely irrelevant, is completely irrelevant to perfection. To the knowledge, to the perfectness of the knowledge of a devotee.
We don't like omniscience. Krishna is not omniscient. We don't like omniscience. It's Aishvarya Bhav. It's not even that. It's like, yes, it's Aishvarya Bhav at the very least.
Yeah, it's not for us. It's not part of our constitution.
It's not particularly charming.
But that doesn't mean that our knowledge cannot be perfect.
I'd like to just show this part here from Kaunteya's book that's in the paper. If that's okay. This is from the book. It's talking about sexism, Prabhupada's thing. It says, for many contemporary people, this quote would represent the undisputable and irrefutable proof that Śrīla Prabhupada was indeed an inveterate and incurable sexist. For many, the chapter could probably just finish here. Where is the need to say more? The question in the title of the section, Sexism in Śrīla Prabhupada's teaching, can be conclusively answered in the affirmative. Yes, there is plenty of sexism in his teachings. Case closed. For the sake of saving time, I might be tempted to go along with that conclusion. I mean, personally, I go along with it. It does, in fact. Yes, by contemporary standards and definitions, some of Śrīla Prabhupada's views certainly qualify as sexist. Yes, Some of his statements, especially if taken out of context or according to particularly literal dictionary definitions, are not only sexist, but inaccurate and objectionable in other ways.
Okay. And
then he breaks them up into, this is the defense of the half hen in your Purva Paksha, I think. The rest of the section, though, will be dedicated to demonstrate, one, aspects of his so-called sexism might be fully justified and ultimately beneficial for human society. Prabhupada, the ultimate red-pilled acharya. Two, some of his sexist, so-called sexist remarks have been misrepresented or aggravated by taking them in isolation from a broader understanding. You spoke to that point earlier, Krishna-kirti Prabhu, about taken out of context. Three, there are many instances in which he modified, qualified, and mollified his so-called sexist statements. His message should therefore be considered as a whole, not in a fragmented form. You also made that point previously about considering things as the harmonic whole. Four, Śrīla Prabhupāda was speaking of women and of human beings in general on different anthropological levels, and some assertions apply to one level but not to another. Okay. Five, his style, as we have seen, was at times impetuous. He often resorted to colloquial generalizations and even hyperboles. Taking those expressions literally would be intellectually disingenuous. Six, some of what he said was the result of having received inaccurate information.
yeah.
I mean, do you disagree with, I mean, this seems like intelligent and, you know, I mean, could not all of these be true? I mean, are any of these categorically like that's just a categorical no to any of these?
Well, the last one especially we take exception with, and number five, I would also say that's not the kind of way you should you talk about his style and everything.
Mm-hmm. But number six,
that deserves a separate. But number six, especially, that is, we do not accept that.
But is this not, now we go back to this point earlier, is this not exactly the 32 ounces versus 64 ounces in the brain? How do you reconcile that? Is this not your position here?
No.
No,
you can't do that. Let me give an example. Now, the Buddhists, when they were attacking the Vedas, they would say, look, they're that if Indra, for example, is temporary, if he passes away, if he goes away with the manifestation, then there's something temporary in the Vedas, and so it's and so when you talk about Indra in the eternal Vedas, but Indra is actually temporary, then that's a fault. Okay, and therefore, because there's a fault in the Vedas cannot be authoritative. So what the response from the Mimamsakas to this was that, well, no, you have to interpret this liberally. You have to understand that that Indra is actually a post, and therefore that's what's eternal. So similarly, it's like Prabhupada's statements cannot always be taken literally. And sometimes you have to understand what, the intent, that the intent is not necessary. Prabhupada's not trying to establish this precise, the precise difference between men's brains and women's brains. And for that.
But is he not, I think I might have just twigged to what's happening here. Is this what's happening here? Is Kaunteya's book a philosophical basis for advocating for female Diksha gurus? Is that what's going on here? Is that the crux of it? Because otherwise, I'm just seeing him say that Srila Prabhupada, the statement that men's brains have 64 ounces and women's brains have 32 ounces is factually incorrect. And Srila Prabhupada's statement, which is sexist, obviously it's a sexual dimorphic difference, but it's incorrect, is the result of having received incorrect information. Or does Kaunteya use that as part of some larger argument to then arrive at the conclusion, therefore female Diksha gurus? Is that what's going on?
Well,
Is that the issue?
first of all, we have to accept the verdict of the Shastra that such a person is not affected by such, misinformation. That's
He's not affected
Shastra.
by it.
That's a Shastra Praman. Okay.
So what you're saying here is that he did say something that was factually incorrect, but it didn't influence.
But
his
that's not what he's advocating. Okay, this is a nature. Okay, this is we discussed this in the paper that Prabhupada sometimes quoted from sources that are faulty. Okay, that that the empirical that you quote from the scientists, their knowledge is produced by pratyaksha and they're under the condition, they're affected by the 4 defects of conditioned souls. They're conditioned souls. Their knowledge is not reliable. So when Prabhupada quotes things like this is not Prabhupada being affected by their things. He's just using it to actually illustrate or to actually convince people of something that's actually the Vedic truth.
Okay. So Kaunteya says some of what he said was the result of having received inaccurate information. You would agree with that statement if it means he makes a supporting statement for some argument he's making and the supporting statement itself is incorrect. I don't know this. There must be some logical thing where you arrive at a correct conclusion, but one of your premises is faulty, but you got there anyway, And so you're like, okay with that, but you're not okay with it if Kaunteya uses this to then say some of the sum of what he said that I'm talking about here is this particular conclusion that he arrived at.
Kaunteya goes further. He actually says that Śrīla Prabhupāda had a misunderstanding that's a result of information he received from these sources.
And so his conclusion, he got it wrong.
Yeah, and so that's why he could say things like that. Well, Prabhupada, he was wrong on things like homosexuality. That he was wrong in criticizing homosexual marriage and so forth like that.
So he actually makes those claims in the book, like a solid assertion. Homosexual marriage is great. Prabhupada got it wrong.
Yeah,
or I think it's kind of a bit, isn't it? If I can remember it correctly, isn't it proposed more speculatively along the lines of we can only speculate about what Śrīla Prabhupada might have said if he had had access to accurate information, or something like that?
No, let me just read some of the excerpts from Srila Srinivas Prabhu's paper here.
Oh, okay. I've got that one here.
Yeah. So let's look for these here. Śrīla Prabhupada inculcated. Let's see. So the first one, it says, we can't exactly determine if or how much Śrīla Prabhupada's views on sexuality and homosexuality were influenced by Victorian Puritanism, possibly through his professors at Scottish Church's College, by his family's cultural heritage, by his contemporary mainstream Bengali and Indian culture, or by his reading of Shastras. So you've got this mixed up in there that, the answer to that question is not never. Okay, that's a very important thing. He feels that Śrīla Prabhupada's knowledge and understanding is influenced by these sources. We reject that on the basis of the Shastra, which says that a liberated soul cannot be affected by these things.
Okay, so a priori, you say that like it's an illegal question to really ask.
You can ask the question, but the answer has to be authoritative. So it comes down to, are we going to accept the Shastra Praman or not?
Okay. So it's a particular view of Śrīla Prabhupada.
Well, it's a Shastric view of Śrīla Prabhupada. That's the thing. The authority of Śrīla Prabhupada as a pure devotee. If you're going to accept that Śrīla Prabhupada, if we accept that Śrīla Prabhupada is a pure devotee, then B, we must also accept. And yes, you can call that a priori knowledge because it's a deductive conclusion, but it's a conclusion that is based on the Shastra. And so therefore, in answer to that, that we can't exactly determine if or how much. Yes, we can exactly determine how much. The answer is none.
Yeah, so this is the question here. We will also never know to what extent the false information Srila Prabhupada received affected his views on women. So your argument basically boils down to this. A, Srila Prabhupada is a pure devotee. It's an assertion, it's a premise. You can accept that or reject it. But B, Shastra says that the views of the pure devotee are not affected by false information that they receive from the material energy. C, therefore, Srila Prabhupada, the answer to this question is we do know, and it is zero.
It is zero.
And to ask to make this statement here is to reject one of those two former premises. Either Srila Prabhupada is not a pure devotee, or we reject the Shastra's statement that says the pure devotee is never affected by false information. Is that the crux of it?
That is correct. That is correct, yes.
So this is either a rejection of Srila Prabhupada, according to this view, it's either a rejection of Srila Prabhupada as a pure devotee or a rejection of Shastra as authoritative praman.
That would be correct, yes. Yes.
I don't know that you can say that you still follow Srila Prabhupada or represent him in that case, because Srila Prabhupada's just a fundamentalist, and he was like, in his own manifested pastimes, he was just like, kick that kind of stuff out whenever it came in. There's multiple examples of that, of that creeping into the movement at the time, the relativization of the Acharya, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, fundamentalist is just a scare word. It's like one man's revolutionary is another man's terrorist.
Well, I don't know necessarily about that. He is a fundamentalist. He's just like it's like fundamentalism. Prabhupada's a pure devotee. The Shastra is the basic praman. It's just the fundamentals, right?
But why the pejorative expression? It's like some people say 2 + 2 is 4. Some people say 2 + 2 is 6. They say we compromise 2 + 2 = 5. That there are absolutes, or there are absolute positions and absolute knowledge in the world, and if we accept that, that doesn't make us. That doesn't. We don't deserve to be. We shouldn't be, a pejorative label shouldn't be ascribed to people just merely because they take a position.
Well, I don't know. I get that it occurs to you as pejorative. I didn't mean it in that sense.
I'm sure you didn't. But you're not that kind of, you're not that kind of person.
I meant it in this sense here, which is, I just looked it up in the dictionary. This is the sense in which I mean this. One who reduces religion to strict interpretation of core or original texts. I mean, you can be like fancy and like, all kinds of like, kind of stuff, but you can't, that's not Prabhupada. Prabhupada is like, Krishna says, I'm the supreme personality Godhead, surrender to me. That's Prabhupada, Prabhupada's like Shastra Yonatvad. He's just like, that's Prabhupada to me.
Well, that definition there from the dictionary is definitely pejorative, and it's definitely reflective of somebody who wrote it doesn't like religion that much.
Okay.
That definition right there is itself. You can also ascribe that to being a fundamentalist, radical secularist too. I would raise the issue: what's wrong if you're talking about a transcendental source, and God says, if God says something to you that this is true, why is that not a very good thing? Why does that deserving of a pejorative label or a pejorative connotation? I don't think this is
How do you see this as pejorative? I'm interested to know how is this
one who
pejorative?
reduces religion to strict interpretation of core or original text.
Yes.
Well, first of all, is that the whole basis of your authority is on core and original text.
Yep. So that's basically what you're saying. You're like, we're going to reduce this thing down. Forget all the fancy neo-Marxist post-Enlightenment stuff you're bolting onto this. We're reducing this down to a strict interpretation of core original texts.
But fundamentalist is a pejorative term generally.
Okay. Oh, I don't mind being called a fundamentalist. I'm happy.
Well, that's because you're brave on this. I also don't mind being called a fundamentalist too, but people who generally use that term are using it as to impugn the character of the people that they ascribe it to.
Okay.
I'm just saying. I'm just pointing this out.
Bit out of touch. Yeah, I think fundamentalism.
I have yet to hear the word fundamentalist used. It's uncommon that it's used in a non-pejorative way.
Okay. So I got your whole argument. Then it's this. It boils down to this point here. Like, if you were looking for the smoking gun in this whole thing, it's not even the statement that Śrīla Prabhupāda was a conditioned soul and he was wrong. It's like, it seems so innocuous. It's almost a speculative. It's speculative. It's like, we'll also never know to what extent the false information Śrīla Prabhupāda received affected his views on women. Show that to anyone in the street, any person who comes along, and they'll say, it just sounds reasonable to me. But your position is that this is like crosses a serious line because of those two premises. Śrīla Prabhupada is a pure devotee. The scripture is the authoritative Praman, and so therefore we know and the scriptural evidence is given in the paper, the first one, that the false information never affects the pure devotee. So to ask this question or to make this statement here is to invalidate one of those two things, which basically takes you outside of ISKCON as Śrīla Prabhupada created it and taught his disciples.
Well, yeah, as I said, that asking the question, actually inquiring is not wrong. But once you get to the point of asserting it, once you get beyond that and asserting it, you may be asking the question in rhetorical mode. Okay, and that is the same as that is indirect, but it's the same as asserting. So there's one other thing I think that we haven't covered that's very important. Is in Kaunteya Prabhu's book, that the distinction he makes between Śrīla Prabhupāda's statements when supported by Shastra and Śrīla Prabhupāda's statements when not supported by Shastra. That's the very first thing that we actually deal with in the executive summary on the main paper. I'll just read it here. Kaunteya Prabhu says in his book, Tough Questions, Difficult Answers, that a guru's authority is limited to whatever he says that can be backed by references from Shastra. Quote, when gurus talk of things not specifically mentioned in the Shastras, we may take those views as personal assessments, honest, but potentially mistaken attempts at clarifying facts and events. Unless backed by Shastric references, we cannot grant to those opinions the same authority of scriptural truths. Non-scriptural views can be taken as subjective, unquote. That's a very, very caustic and very wrong idea. For several reasons. First of all, are we on the platform? Are we on the position as a pure Śrīla Prabhupada to be able to assess his understanding of his expression of some statement, even on material things, as being in line or out of line with Shastra?
This was to your point about Shastra, that we may not even be available or that we don't know about it. We're like going to the doctor and the doctor says the thing and you're like, oh, he didn't quote the.
Yeah, it's like, for example, that example when Śrīla Prabhupada went to see his Guru Maharaj at his ashram, he was faced by a serpent, by a snake, And he didn't know, he says of himself, he wasn't sure what to do. And then his guru, Maharaj, came out on the balcony and said, kill it. And the snake was killed. And then later on, he read in Bhagavatam how the snake is not to be shown mercy. So we're kind of, in a similar situation. We do not have the depth and understanding of Śrīla Prabhupāda's knowledge of Shastra, and especially considering we're talking about someone who's directly in touch with Krishna. We should not even think that we can judge Śrīla Prabhupada like this.
This then indicates that he here accepts the primacy of scripture, of Shastra, so premise B, and it's a rejection of premise A, Śrīla Prabhupada is a pure devotee, or it's a rejection of the view that the statements of a pure devotee are in themselves authoritative evidence. No?
Yeah. If a pure devotee says something, just like, for example, the law of disciplic succession. This is in a letter to 1975 letter to Tushta Krishna. You probably heard of it. That, in the presence of your spiritual master, you should not accept disciples, but bring prospective disciples into him. And then in his absence, that one may accept disciples without limit. And Prabhupada says this is the law of disciplic succession. Now, I remember in the days when the Ritvik days, the bad old days of the Ritvik controversy, when that was the hot thing, this was refuted by various Ritvik authorities, because it says, well, this is just in a letter to an individual, and not only that, but Prabhupada's writing to an ambitious individual, so he's lying. So he's just lying to this individual to keep him in, from doing something ambitious. No. Ishvaranam vachaha satyam.
Who gave this? Who gave that interpretation?
That interpretation, that you could find in the final order.
Okay. Haven't read that for a few years. It's coming back now, I hear.
Right, but there's a certain commonality in all these deviations. There's a certain commonality, and at least one of them is I would call purpose-driven hermeneutics, where you interpret things so that whatever Prabhupada says, so that it supports or at least doesn't attack or undercut your what you want Prabhupada to say. Mm-hmm. So, which is why having rules, knowing at least some basic fundamental rules of Praman Shastra, which some people call hermeneutics, but Praman Shastra is really the term we should be using because it's the Vedic term. Ishvaranam vachaha satyam, that the words of the Lord's empowered servants are always true. So, in that example, we have to take Śrīla Prabhupada's words as true. That, it's the etiquette, that this is the law of disciplic succession. Now, the point especially I wanted to make here is that what was challenged also by some Ritvik scholars was that, where's this law in the Shastra? Where is it? We've never heard of it, but Prabhupada says it. But our point is that because Prabhupada said it, and as a Dharmagya, this is to be taken as good as Shastra. It's to be taken as good as Shruti and Smriti.
Okay, but it just comes back to the same point for me again, Prabhu. How do you deal with this? That Śrīla Prabhupada said men brains go to 64 ounces and women's to 32. It's a non-scriptural view. And so now you're saying it's as good as Shastra. So are you going to stand by that? I mean, I'm okay with it, but just it seems to me that to be consistent, you're going to have to say something like prior to Kali Yuga, this was a fact, or something about the 64 ounces and the 32, or you're going to have to accept Kaunteya's point, because how do you harmonize this?
No, I don't think so. I don't think those are the alternatives. It's, as I said, it's a source that itself is, comes from imperfect people. And therefore you just have to understand that it was being utilized to try to convince people of a Vedic truth. it goes like you observed. Monday comes after Sunday. Is that a fault? No. This is why the Shastra Praman is so important. Is that we have to. There's two things here. One is that we have to understand that a pure devotee like Prabhupada, he is not making a mistake. So then we have to understand his words in a way that it is not mistaken. Just like, for example, that the like I mentioned, that the Vedas, they say that they talk about Indra, but Indra's not eternal. So then we have to understand that it's not eternal. It's what the Vedas are talking about is the post of Indra. Okay, so we have to understand Prabhupada's words in such a way that they are not imperfect.
Is this not, though, a case of like choosing where you draw this line? Because this does seem to me to be a logical inconsistency in the argument, because Kaunteya is saying if it's not backed up by Shastra, then it's in a different category than when Śrīla Prabhupāda says X, women must be protected, at all stages of their life. That's 9.3 Manu Samhita, no independence. Okay, fine, But then when Prabhupada says something else that's not based on Shastra, it's like, in that case, he may make statements that are mistaken. But you say simultaneously that, well, he might say some statement that's mistaken, but it's backing up a Shastric point. Okay, I get that. That's fine. But now Kaunteya is saying when he says something that's not backed by Shastra, it could also be this second category of mistaken.
This is the thing. Kaunteya is making the point is that so-called mistaken statement is reflective of a misunderstanding that has actually personally affected Śrīla Prabhupāda's understanding.
Okay, so this is a more okay.
That's the difference. Śrīla Prabhupada is not. Śrīla Prabhupada is not, just because Śrīla Prabhupada quotes the 64 versus 32 ounces does not mean that he actually believes that.
That's going to be a very subtle point for a lot of people to be able to grok that.
Yeah.
It takes a lot
there.
Yeah, but it takes a lot to this is a very, very subtle place to be in. But I mean, I'm just hearing you say that Prabhupada was on the money and the moon landings were faked. Ultimately, that's where it washes out for me. But
I don't think that Śrīla Prabhupada said they were fake, but they did not land on the moon. They landed somewhere else, but not the moon.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't say they didn't go somewhere. He said that whatever they landed, it wasn't the moon.
Yeah, I mean the main points he's making there that were shastrically validated are the moon is further away than the sun, and that you have to have a particular body and qualification to enter into the moon planet, and that in terms of the cosmology of the Earth and the moon system, the moon is another planetary system for higher karmic living entities.
Even if they got there, the descriptions of the moon should conform with those of the Shastras. That there's vegetation, there's people, there's buildings and everything, and there is none of that. So that's therefore Śrīla Prabhupada concluded they didn't go to the moon. Now he's not saying that the pratyaksha was fake, that somebody filmed faked it.
But it so obviously is, Prabhu. Come on. Like my cell phone in the last 10 years, we live in a world that's indistinguishable from a world where they faked it, Prabhu, technology-wise. It's like so clear. How can
that's why we need Shastra to be able to tell us, because that's the only source of information that's not subject to the 4 defects of conditioned life.
Yeah, 100%. I agree on that. I appreciate the papers that have been presented by the ISKCON India Scholars Board. I'd like to give a shout out to your crew. Let's bring them all up here.
They'll definitely appreciate it. We've got a lot of people. We're bringing more people, trying to bring more people on board here. So we've been steadily expanding the group. So
Okay.
Basagosh Prabhu, he's definitely one of ours. Fluent in Sanskrit, Hindi, Mukundadatta Prabhu, and he's definitely one of our staunch seniors. Academically qualified, translator, Maharaj, humble, learned sadhu, certainly, Sahadev Prabhu.
Sahadev's
Oh,
picture is
why
missing.
is that picture is missing? Something's wrong there.
I would refresh the page, but I don't know if the server is up. I've had it open for the last couple of days.
Okay, I'm going to have to check, see whether that is.
A problem
Yeah.
at my end or on the
So
server.
these are, Vidvan Guranga Prabhu, also, very, very learned, very capable, Sanskritist and philosopher. There's myself, and I'm the resident kind of like a scientist statistician. Damodar Prabhu, he is a gem of a scholar, very humble, unassuming, but especially when he talks about Praman Shastra and hermeneutics, and he's given several seminars on those already, and he's very, very capable, very gifted devotee. Whenever you get a chance to talk to him, learn as much as you can from him. And Sridhar Srinivasa, no, this is Arjuna Shaka
Arjuna
Prabhu.
Shaka.
He's also a very, very capable devotee, Sanskritist, and he's a physician also. And so he works with the Bhaktivedanta Research Center. And Sridhar Srinivas, he's also a gem of a scholar. He's published 3 books, I think now. And he also has close relationships, ties with many top scholars within the Sri Vaishnava movement. He's from a Sri Vaishnava family. For your information, his family, they've been worshiping Shalagram Shila for more than 300 years. So, very special to take birth in such a family, and he's taking full advantage in Krishna consciousness of his high position, and he's certainly worthy of it. And Vamshidhar Prabhu, he's our staunch ISKCON Youth Forum preacher in ISKCON Baroda, and he's traveling right now abroad, but he was one of the essay contributors. Definitely a wonderful, humble, dedicated devotee. And who else? Dr. Damodar Chaitanya Prabhu. His photos now. He's brahmachari, also dedicated IYF preacher in Baroda, capable Sanskritist as well. And Jai Nityananda Prabhu. Oh, I'm sad that all these pictures are not manifesting. I don't know if it's bandwidth or there's something on our server. I'm going to have to check on it. He's been teaching Sanskrit at the Gurukul in Nandagram. That's the Varnashram project, Varnashram village established under Bhakti Vikas Maharaj. Oh, there's the picture. So it must be bandwidth issue.
The server is up.
Yeah. So he's been teaching Sanskrit to the students there for the past 10 years. He's also used to teach Sanskrit at the Sanskrit Bharati here in India. And so also very capable scholar, very very gifted, and very dedicated devotee. And we're looking to onboard some more devotees too.
How do people get in touch to join?
We meet them, and we it's like,
It's all about who you know.
it's kind of like that. It's like that, and do something practical, do something, also you make some contribution for the contribution in the sense of some meaningful work or something like that for what the ISKCON India Scholars Board is doing. And
Right on.
then we And if it's something that they would like to do, then we're certainly happy to have them join.
Pay your dues, get your street cred, and then join
But,
the gang. How about we go? Is there anything more that you wanted anything that we missed? Any important points that you wanted to cover?
I think just very briefly, I just want to show the table of contents for the main paper. Just make a few brief comments about what some of the sections are talking about.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. Let's sit here.
And so we have a Mangalacharana. The devotees conjointly we figured we thought that this work should have one to invoke auspiciousness and purify our intelligence. So purpose, there's just a few key passages in the book that we thought were they talked about ISKCON's future, what Kaunteya Prabhu seemed to consider a desirable future for ISKCON, and we thought that those, to keep those in mind. And I think that different devotees will look at those quotes in very different ways, depending on which side of this issue you're going to be on. So from our side, they were very alarming. From his side, I think they're very desirable. Executive summary for very busy people. We've tried to condense all the main points in the book into a few short pages. So if you're very busy, check out the executive summary. Introduction, we talk about the motivation, why we wrote this at all, some of the, institutional history. We didn't just take up this project because we thought it would be a good idea, but we were actually asked by the ICC chairman, Sahadev Prabhu. ICC, ISKCON Continental Committee. They are they represent, as an organization, they represent all of the ISKCON leaders at all levels of the ISKCON society within India. So ICC. So,
okay, within India.
Yeah.
So is it also known as the Bureau? The ISKCON Bureau?
No, ISKCON Bureau, they are the actual legal, they are in the eyes of the law, they are the actual persons who have the fiduciary responsibility for managing and directing ISKCON India. So that's kind of like, you might say it's kind of like the GBC of India in one sense. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole history. And then between that, you have another group called the ISKCON India Advisory Council, which has been just renamed to ISKCON Bharat Advisory Council. And they're comprised of representatives from the ICC and representing different divisional regions within India. It's like about 40 people or something. And then they're an advisory committee to the ISKCON India Bureau. So these are kind of like the different layers of.
And then you have the Shastrik Advisory Council, and then there's the ISKCON India Scholars Board. There's the
ISKCON India Scholars Board. We're a creation of the IBAC, the ISKCON India, or formerly ISKCON India, but ISKCON Bharat Advisory Council. So we're kind of like, we were created by them back in 2013. We mentioned this in our mission statement. Mission statement on the website.
And the SAC,
anyway,
the Shastrik Advisory Council, how does that relate to?
That's a GBC creation. That's their thing. So we're kind of like the Indian ISKCON India version of that.
Okay, so there's like a whole bureaucracy of ISKCON India, which is like a replica of the GBC one.
ISKCON India is
its own universe.
It's huge. We're dealing with like about $4 billion of assets, within this country alone. So it's like practically speaking, everywhere else is, India is just, the elephant in the room, so to speak.
The rest of the ISKCON's accounting is a rounding error.
Basically, yeah. That's not so far off.
Okay.
So in terms of manpower, number of temples, and just assets. ISKCON India is just huge.
Mm.
So anyway, just to go into Vishaya, so we talk about the topic, and really this was kind of like the first thing, that separating the Shastra. One point a significant point that we didn't make, just one last point that we didn't make, but which is dealt with in the paper, and we probably don't have time to go over it here, is that the separation of Śrīla Prabhupāda's Shastra-supported statements from his non-Shastra-supported statements is not tenable, because when we get to it, and we provide many examples, the things that Śrīla Prabhupada that are objected to in Kaunteya's book are actually supported by Shastra.
Mm.
So that's especially true in the female issues, the issues concerning women. It's especially true in that case.
Meme
Also,
post.
yeah.
You can see
Also-
the meme of Mr. Burns. He's like, is it me? And then he's like, no, it's the children who are wrong. It's kind of like, is it Śrīla Prabhupada? No, it's the Shastra that's wrong. Would be the next position to take.
Yeah. So, it's, that's a major point that we really didn't cover, but it's a very important one. So, so the Samshaya, we try to attempt to represent Kaunteya Prabhu's argument there. And, basically, we're trying to follow the logic of, you go from Śrīla Prabhupada experiencing physical difficulties to pain to those, physical or social influences actually influencing his understanding. That's kind of the gist of that. Then a little bit of, in-depth looking at that, the core idea, Siddhanta. We talk about the pure devotee. The authority of Śrīla Prabhupada's statements is in his books. The authority of Prabhupada's statements were not backed by Shastra. These are very important points of hermeneutics. Lots of praman, lots of things that are very useful there. We also look at the pragmatic reasons for modifying or removing Śrīla Prabhupada's statements. That's important in the sense that the pragmatic reasons don't rely at all. The truth of Prabhupada's statements is not relevant to any pragmatic reason. And then finally, a theology of embodiment. Kaunteya Prabhu in his book, said that maybe there's a body of theology of embodiment. So that's our response specifically to that I guess, ask in his book. So he asked, we delivered. Sangati, application, an authentic exegesis. There's an important thing, that we wrap everything up there, but we also provide at the very end an authentic exegesis of one of Śrīla Prabhupada's remarks contradicted by modern science. So, we offer kind of like what would be a defense of Śrīla Prabhupada that we feel that is also faithful to respecting Śrīla Prabhupada's position as a pure devotee. So that's a practical suggestion. So that's really the paper in the nutshell. And the other papers that we've mentioned, they're much shorter, and for many they'll be also
much easier read.
Yeah.
This one, for those people who are into philosophy, this is like a masterclass. It's great. And how many pages is this in total?
It's about 70 pages or so.
Okay. Very good. Kaunteya's book came in at 666 pages.
So we feel justified at being 10% of that to address specific issues.
Yeah. Awesome. How about we go to like summary, concluding remarks, Prabhu? You okay with that, or is there anything else that you wanted to cover?
I think that the main thing is that the main difficulty I perceive with devotees in struggling with this is accepting the Shastra Praman, accepting the a priori coming from Shastra, the notion that a pure devotee cannot commit mistakes, and that specifically means not being affected by these 4 defects, which specifically means, the technical details we've covered at length in this book. What is Brahma, Pramada, Vipralipsa, Karanapatava? So, it's, you start with that, and then you try to understand everything around it, because there's no fault in the Shastra. That is the proper way we should understand, Srila Prabhupada's position and authority. And the reality of his remarks, and whether that is how we should try to understand. If Prabhupada's understanding is correct, we should not be, according to the Shastra, then we should not be trying to ascribe misunderstanding to him. We should try to understand how his remarks are correct, and then explain it in that way.
Okay, thank you, Dhammadevi.
Oh.
Concluding remarks.
Yeah, I will read all of this. Sounds very what do you say? Intelligently provoking. Intellectually provoking, and also understanding more from the scriptures are perfect. There's nothing that can be misinterpreted. Well, it can be misinterpreted by people, but there is no wrong in it.
That's the standard.
Yeah, and also how ferociously you defend Śrīla Prabhupada. And
that's also the tradition. That's both the tradition and the Shastric and the directions from the Shastras.
And yeah, that gives me a lot of faith and a lot of power to read all of them and understand more in depth. Yeah, that's
for me, the position that you presented there, Prabhu, it's it might not be true. I'm going to say it like this. It might not be true, but it is the Prabhupada position. And so it's like, if you're going to be like, hey, we're going to do the Prabhupada thing, that's the thing. That's it there. All these other ideas, sure, you can have them. There's a million different ideas and approaches and stuff, but that's something else other than, like Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita is Bhagavad Gita as it is, No tricky separating, Krishna's within from his without or nothing like that. Just take it and just take all of it and just go for it, And that was Prabhupada's approach. That's been ISKCON's approach all the way through up till now. Now we have this other kind of stuff coming back in again. Do I want to cut out people's tongue for it or anything like that? Look, for me, it's like I might agree or disagree with different parts of Kaunteya's book or something like that. We'll get him back on here to talk about it. One thing I appreciate about his book and him publishing his book, aside from the fact that it's got like 666 pages in it, which is like one epic shout out, is that it's stimulated and triggered this conversation and the production of this paper, which is a masterpiece, and like the assembly of those devotees and then creating it in this way, following the 5-sided logical syllogisms of Nyaya. It's like, it's what Prabhupada wanted to create, which is a society of Brahmanas and Brahminical discourse, which is what we see right here. And, for whatever faults may be present in the book that sparked this paper, I acknowledge that it created this conversation and sparked this the production of this.
It was long overdue, I think. Addressing these issues is long overdue.
I think so, and especially these days where we are full on Kali Yuga, people's minds and ways of thinking are very disruptive, and that is the time where sastras and all of these very knowledgeable people like yourself have to come and be cutting with what's the real knowledge, and no nonsense, because what is happening these days is people are just concocting and creating more and more nonsense and more disruption to actually what it meant to be life on top of what is already messed up. Yeah. Okay.
Those are very encouraging words. This is we live for this.
The other thing
we live to live up to those words.
The other thing I think is important is like the tension between these two positions, and like in I think you will really enjoy Garudadas' paper when the master speaks as well. It's kind of like tough questions, difficult answers, light, or like an intro to that. It's much shorter, but it's that at the heart of that, driving that, is this desire to reach people that's pushing that. And that's, you know, in order to reach people, sometimes there can be an overreach, but the missionary spirit and the zeal, whatever, like Prabhupada apologizing to his God brothers at the end, you know, whatever I've said, you know, that I just was like, you know, it was all done in love and for preaching. And then at the same time, there's the heart that wants to reach out, and there's also the head there, and the two of them operating together is the essential dynamic. Because if we have one without the other, we're going to end up with like caste Brahmanism, you know, or we're going to end up with Sahajism. And so we've got to somehow keep these two things connected. That's my firm conviction.
We have to preach sensitively. We have to preach the truth sensitively. We shouldn't compromise on the truth.
Mm.
You know, if there comes a difference between truth and being kind to people, then we have to default with the truth. Prabhupada discusses that in his purport to Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, text. Not 15. Is it 15? No, it's the I think 15. No, not 15:7. It's talking about the austerity. Anudvegam karam dakyam satyam priyam hitam chaya swadhyaya vyasanam chaiva van mayam tapa uchite. That shloka so the purport to that shloka, Prabhupada makes that point. We should speak pleasingly, and we should speak the truth pleasingly. But if sometimes there's a difference, then we fall on the side of the truth.
And finally, Prabhu, to you personally, and also, you know, and included in that all of your brothers in ISKCON India Scholars Board, thank you for taking the time, dedicating your life in this lifetime to develop yourself to the point where you could produce and did produce this paper, and for taking the time to come on to the podcast and to step with it through us today. Thank you.
I would just like to say a thank you on behalf of all the members. I'm just a tiny member. My role was in coordinating so many of the great insights, but the credit really goes to all the wonderful devotees in the Scholars Board and in the ISKCON India management who have created the Scholars Board to allow us to take up this kind of service. And I also want to thank you and your Dharma Patni for also giving us a chance to explain some chance to explain our work to a larger audience. I also just want to say one personal thing, Sita Pati, that I've wanted to meet you for many years actually, because we are professionally, we're colleagues, professionally also too.
Mm-hmm.
And we also, and I think that profession also does dispose us to look at these issues in certain ways, certain common ways. And so I've been missing your association.
Yeah, it's great to finally have the opportunity to have this association and to discuss.
We should meet offline sometime just to chat.
Yeah, 100%.
Are you in India, Prabhu?
I'm in India, yes, Delhi.
I will bring him to India so you will meet him in person. I will drag him.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we'll come by for lunch.
Absolutely. I have a lot
And
of devotees
Kirtan.
come by for lunch, actually. I make a great pizza.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Maybe
I'm
I
in.
shouldn't have said that. Maybe I shouldn't have said. I should take this offline at this point.
And so, what's your address, Prabhu? Yeah. And to everyone who's watching, thanks for tuning in, watching live. Thanks for all your contributions and comments that you made. They definitely did shape the direction of the conversation, even though we didn't necessarily pull them in. Thanks to Rama Raj, Radha Ramandas, Shaman Tuckalila, Rupa Cameron, Fenella Collier, and we even had Sridhar Srinivasa Prabhu show up and pop in there for a while. Yeah. Okay, thanks so much. Until the next time that we get to speak, we'll hook up offline, Krishna-kirti Prabhu.
Absolutely.
And we'll be back for another episode of the Vaishnava Voices podcast, Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam, Total World Victory of Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Jai. Jai Śrīla Prabhupāda.
Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.